Let me explain first what we're doing. Just keep it in really simple terms. Sometimes we sing all these nice Tibetan melodies, but we forget the meaning. This is such wonderful meaning, you know, like, you know yourself, if you go somewhere, you never go empty-handed. You don't just walk into somebody's house for dinner without a bottle or something. You don't walk into a shop and ask for an ice cream and then don't give money. We always offer something to receive something, which is fantastic. So here, if we know Buddha's cosmology, we're going to visualize all the amazing world and pile it all up and offer it as to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. But if we don't know the, you know, the contents of the universe according to like Mount Meru and all that business, like I bet you didn't learn at school that our sky is blue because it reflects off lapis lazuli. We didn't learn that, did we? But if we know the regular world, like we see it with our views, then we offer all the marvelous things of the world. Just pile up all the things of the objects of the senses, things that make people happy, pile them all up and offer to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. It's got such wonderful meaning. Let's do. And this is the center offering. This is like, because you've invited, so you offer to request the teachings. This is wonderful.
Okay. Saji puki jukshin meto tramrira lingji nidegan padi Sangye jindu mikte uvar idroku namagar jingla chuparshu jetsun lama gampa kenam Ki chukui kala can say choosing tree jitar zambe dulje zinma la zabge chuki
So when we say this mantra, we visualize Buddha happily receiving our offering. And there's Charmaine offering the mandala itself. Have a look. So we imagine offering the whole universe. It's so marvelous. And all the Buddhas bliss out.
Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamiriyataya.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So this next little prayer I will lead. And this is, as always, it was always good to remind ourselves, two things we're saying. The first is for those of us who already formally think, you know, identify with being Buddhists, relying upon the Buddha. We're saying, you know, we're basically saying until we are enlightened, we rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. That's the first two lines. The second two lines are then expressing our motivation or our purpose, why we're here together, why we listen to these teachings. We're saying by the virtuous karmic seeds that we're going to drop into our bank vaults by listening to these teachings, may we become a Buddha, so we then can be a benefit to all sentient beings. That's our first recitation. So we'll do two more in Tibetan. Sangye charan soke chognam la jancho baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chernyen gi personam ki chola penche sangye drupha shok sangye charan soke chognam la jancho baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chernyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye drupha shok. Okay. So no, I mentioned to Mary to put on to all of you that I normally do course notes, but I decided this time I really love you. I encourage you to get this book. It's a fundraiser for the Prison Project anyway, and you can even, you know, but you get a digital copy. It's quite, you can offer $3. It doesn't matter. There's no limit, and you can get it like in a second. You know, digital. You go onto that website. Mary gave you, I think, a link to, but we'll go through. We'll use this as the basis, obviously, for our teachings today. So how it all happened was, Lama Zopa Rinpoche asked me to he's been, you know, the Prison Project started. Okay, I'll tell you about the Prison Project. It started when I was editing Mandala. It was when I was in Land of Medicine Buddha, editing Mandala. I started that in 96. And something like 96, 95. No, 95, I think I did the first issue. When we started it as a magazine. Before that was like a newsletter. And then I got a letter. I got a letter from a young prisoner in 96, April or February or something, I forget. Arturo, young Mexican-American, who told me he'd been in gangs since he was like 11. in prisons, juvenile prisons, since he was 12. A Mexican, but American born in LA. And all he'd known his life was gangs, gangs. I mean, it was gang was incredible. All he'd known all his life was this. So, then he was sent, he got sent to, juvenile prison first. And then eventually when he was 16, he was tried as an adult from, and got 3 life sentences. I mean, he didn't kill anybody. The laws are so insanely strict, you can't believe, He never killed anyone. He would have a gun, but he didn't kill anybody. So he got 3 life sentences, age 16, tried as an adult. So he was in the California prison system. And the California prison system, I swear to you, it's so fascinating. I mean, things are changing now. That's 20 years ago. Nearly 20 years ago, I met him. 95 years ago, 17 years ago. 95, 105, 115. No, 25 years ago. Oh, my Lord. 95, 105, 115. Yeah, nearly 30 years ago. Good heavens. Time goes. So anyway, he wrote first, and this letter landed on my desk. It was addressed to the editor of Mandala. And how we got the letter, how he wrote to us is because how did it do? How did he get the letter? How did he write to us? Yeah, okay, that's right. He was in the security housing unit, which is the SHU, they call it, which initially was considered against human rights, but now it's totally normal, where they're in their prison cells 23 hours a day and on what they call permanent lockdowns. Now it's really not uncommon. And being a Latino and the gangs in the prisons, I mean, I learned all this as I wrote to more and more wrote to us. So this letter arrived. He got our address. How? It must have been in the book. Who was the first person to write? So there's a library, and the SHU has a really good library. I mean, you have to rely on these kind librarians. This librarian had a couple of Lama Yeshe's books. It's like a miracle, So Arturo sitting in his cell 23 hours a day, all he's known as gangs all his life. And he got this book of Lama Yeshe's, and he was very moved. It was Introduction to Tantra, actually, but he was really moved by the talk of compassion. So he wrote, and our address has to have been in there. That's why he wrote. Mandala. So he wrote and said he'd read this book. So it sat on my desk, I must say, for a month or so. I didn't answer it immediately. And when eventually I did, I sent him a book, and then he wrote back, and then it grew from there. And within a year, there were 40 people writing. It was all word of mouth, So what I learned was, anyway, he wrote. So that's how the thing started. And I wrote back, and then before you know it, all these people writing, sending books. And then before you know it, it was too many things to do. And then every time a letter would come asking for books, these people asking for books, you can't give them a website. They don't have computers. They have no money. Most have no friends. Most are working class. No, I'd say of all the people since that period, since I've known all these prisoners, and probably maybe 25,000 people have written to us over the years. I say us, but I stopped running it 12 years ago. I still help a few people in prison, my friends. But I mean, they're mostly working class. I don't think I've ever met, poor, working class, Black, Latino, big percentage, of course. No friends, no money, no family, most of them, nothing to rely on, nothing, no one to turn to. And in these places, I mean, they're garbage dumps. When I had a letter from a friend in Norway, he said he was looking forward to going to prison soon. He had a 2-year stint in prison in this wonderful, specially organized, beautiful place in the country where they educate the prisoners. He couldn't wait. It was like a 2-year retreat for free. He was looking forward to going to prison, They do not talk like that in this country, I promise. Some are quite pleasant, but usually they're pretty ugly. Noise, you can't even believe the noise. Like living one of them said, Arturo said, in these quiet little cells where he is 23 hours a day, he said it's like being in a rock concert all day. Try and think of that, noise all day. In these little isolated cells, in these SHU sections where they have 1 hour, I think 1 hour a day, maybe 1 hour a day in another cell where they walk up and down, and there are kind of skylight. So at least you can see the reflection of the light coming from the sky, but they don't actually see anything outside. They don't actually breathe air. So many of them are sick, because they just live in this like 20, 30 years living in this, neon lit little rooms with noise like you can't believe. Many going completely out of their brains. You would. Even us, supposedly with a practice, we'd go out of our brain 23 hours a day in these garbage dumps, constant screaming, many insane people around you, clanging and banging and shouting. Maybe a couple of hours of silence at the night when they're asleep, but even then you can hear the snoring or the mutterings of the person 4 cells down, because there is not any sound, soundproofing. That is a fact. So pretty hideous environment. So he wrote, I sent him a book, and he became, I've known him since 95, and he got out about 3 years ago. He never killed anybody, just had to work so hard. Once you get in, it's easy to get in, but to get out, you've got to prove you're practically like a saint, You've got to prove so hard to these parole boards. I mean, it's just insane, the demands, the expectations of the parole boards. Luckily, fortunately, he found himself a lawyer. It's many kind lawyers working for free for these young men, mostly young men that we knew. All those years, this is what's fascinating, all the years, I would say all those years that I was working, and since then, I'd probably say less than 1% have been female who've answered, who've written letters. Because the main thing of the prison project is to offer books. It was really clear, because America's a big country, you can't go to these prisons. I mean, you can't go to every one. There's thousands of them all over the world, all over the country. So the main project from the beginning that we decided, the main service, was to answer letters, to give them a mentor, answer letters, and take their phone calls, and then to provide them with books and materials. And that's the most precious gift you can give. Because you might go in there every week and visit and have a lovely class, and you walk out the door, they're back with their own idiotic minds, their suffering minds, but they've got to have something to read. This has been the miracle. The books we offered, thousands and thousands and thousands of books, That's the liberation prison. And it's still much the same now. I took in Turkey an Australian nun who took over from me in 2009. She runs it now. So anyway, a couple of years ago, Rinpoche asked me to put all the letters together, because they write to Rinpoche. Okay, one more point. We had a newsletter. I don't think I do a newsletter now, which is very sad. We did one 6 times a year. And that's their spiritual, that was their Sangha. They didn't have any contact with each other. You be one guy in one miserable prison in the middle of nowhere in Idaho, and you read this newsletter, and you've got all your friends in California and all the other states, but you're not allowed to write to each other as prisoners, so they have no Sangha. But to have a newsletter was like a miracle. I can't describe. It was like a miracle having a newsletter, I don't know if Turkey still does in newsletters, but we did one 6 times a year. And we had art. The prisoners' art was amazing. We had teachings from Rinpoche, from Lama. We had their poems. It was just a wonderful, wonderful thing. So it's precious. I wish they did it again. So anyway, they'd hear about Rinpoche. They'd read so they'd write to him. So he's had hundreds of people write to him over the years, I think so. So in the end, he had all these letters to probably about 100 prisoners over the last 20 years. So Holly sent me all the letters, and Rinpoche asked me to put it into a book. Well, we could have done it in the form of letters, but there was no letter from the prisoner. That wasn't included. It was just Rinpoche's advice. So in the end, I just decided we'd make it like a proper book and turn it into a narrative. So I had to make it coherent, So of course, all the teachings fit perfectly into the Lam Rim. We didn't make it explicit, but if you can hear from I'll read the contents out. And then it's obviously the Lam Rim. Everything's the Lam Rim. But of course, the main emphasis, and this is Rinpoche's style, he's always the most radical teacher. He only ever teaches at the highest level of emptiness. He teaches, merely labeled. He only ever teaches at the most outrageous level of bodhicitta, the attitude of transforming problems into happiness. That's his favorite topic. We know if we know Rinpoche. So it's kind of shocking. Most people don't teach like Rinpoche. Most people don't teach like Rinpoche. Most people play down Buddhism and make it very sweet and cute and make yourself relaxed and be comfy and be kind to yourself and be mindful. Really very nice. But Rinpoche just goes straight between the eyeballs, I mean, he tells the truth. He's unbelievable. Let me find the book. Prisoners. Here it is. So Rinpoche loves it. He's got his own way of saying words, naturally. And all the people everybody tries to edit him. Everyone tries to cut it down because he doesn't often use proper grammar. Who cares? He's allowed to. He's a poet, Come on. Narrow him down, squeeze him into these narrow, ridiculous literary rules. It's just rubbish. To find the book first. In a prison. Where's the book? Corrections. That'll do. Enjoy life. Here we go. Here we go. This'll do. The whole book, I hope. That's it. Yeah. Okay. So I'll read you the contents of the book. This is how it just, I sort of got all the letters and started to go through the letters and identified the different sections and just started putting them in this order. And this is how it evolved. This is the structure of the book, the chapters. So the title, Enjoy Life Liberated from the Inner Prison, then the outer prison won't become the real prison. And this has always been from the beginning. One of the first people who wrote to Rinpoche was in fact Arturo, this young man. And that was the first time I heard him say it. And he said it to Arturo, and he said it all the time. He said, your prison is nothing in comparison with the inner prison of ordinary people. So of course, when we understand Buddhism properly, this is an absolute truth, but a shock if we don't understand, a shock, You mean I'm in prison? My prison? Here you are sitting in your rich house with your lovely hubby and your kids and whatever you want, and you think and you're not in prison. Because Rinpoche is talking about the suffering of change, the main suffering, you know, the one that doesn't look like suffering, the one that looks like happiness. So Rinpoche is intense. So for the book cover, I just decided that's such an intense book. I mean, such an intense book. Wisdom didn't want to publish it. I don't want to be rude about Wisdom, but it's too much for their minds. They've got to go to all their salesmen from, you know, what's the publisher? What's their distributor? I can't think. This is too much for ordinary people. Rinpoche is too much, I swear to you. So then Nick published it, and I edited it, and we used Rinpoche's title. I was so happy. And I wanted the happiest picture in the whole world. So screen share the cover, Charmaine, just to show. Screen share it. Oh, you can't. Just show up close then. Come on. Can you see? It's a picture of Rinpoche under this tree, whether it's a real tree or a fancy tree, I don't know, but it's in Singapore. And there's Rinpoche laughing wonderfully, joyfully laughing, you know. So I wanted the happiest picture of all with this intense title. There we go. Enjoy life liberated from the inner prison. Then the outer prison won't become the real prison. So the whole emphasis is this, and it's so powerful. And of course, like everything, it's based on emptiness. Emptiness means, the whole point is when we understand emptiness, the prison is not existing from its own side. It's how you label it. It's so evident. It's always those stories I tell about that woman, Sunny, you know, it's the most outrageous example of proving this point. And she was able to transform her mind and reinterpret prison, this hellhole, you know, accused of murdering 2 policemen, and she wasn't even guilty, living in a cell on her own for years and years with just a Bible. All she had was her own mind, her own emotional intelligence, and she was able to change her mind. She said, I realized finally I couldn't change anything. She's not from here. I met her in other ways. She's out now. Finally, I realized I couldn't change anything. This is what's so immutable about prisons, you know. You're against the wall. There's nothing you can do. But they couldn't take my mind from me. So I decided I'm not a prisoner. I'm a monk. I'm in a cell. I'm in a cave. It's exactly, this is the tone of Rinpoche's whole book. These outrageous people, you know, these people who wrote to him, asking him to be their teacher or whatever, asking for advice. One fellow, and much of the book is his letter, I promise, Rinpoche wrote 45-page typed letter. I mean, he would spend weeks on letters, you know. And at any given time, we quoted this in the preface of Rinpoche's earlier book, Dear Lama Zopa, which is a bunch of letters from people, regular people. That, I mean, I think Holly said he's got a folder at any given time of 2,000 letters in it. People wait 2 years, 3 years for a response, but it always seems to be the right time. A friend of mine, one of his students in Australia, she had brain cancer. She got a letter in 2 years, but it was the right timing. So it's kind of interesting. So this is all the letters from the prisoners, and they're all mixed together. There's no names. It's written as a book. So the contents, which is the outline of the book, essentially, you can see it all fits, completely fits into the Lam Rim. Of course it does. It has to do that because the Lam Rim is the package that fits everything. So this is the first little thing, you know, hello, this is something actually he gave to a bunch of women prisoners, but we added in their brothers. This little quote at the very beginning. Hello, all of you who are my brothers and sisters. There's no reason to be unhappy. A prison is just a label, another name, one of the numberless labels. And then something else he said, think that it is not prison. It is your retreat for liberation, when you can get in, where you can get enlightened and enlighten numberless others, who are our precious mother sentient beings. I mean, talking at this level, you know, it's actually would almost be considered like abuse, because the prisons here are shocking. They're outrageous, you know, not as bad as in some countries, but the numbers here. America has 5% of the population of the whole world, but more than 25% of the prison population. So it's so intense, you know, it's not getting any better. So it sounds shocking to tell people that, you know, to be happy to be in prison, to be happy you're on death row. I mean, you've got to understand the context. You've got to understand the meaning of this, you know. It sounds so shocking. He'd be considered a torturer to give people advice like this. So you've got to understand the framework, you know, the context. So the contents, it's clear, it's a Lam Rim. So I divide it into 2 parts, you know, how to think, just general advice, then what practical things, what to do. And actually you'll see when you get this book, it's perfect advice for every single person. It's putting exactly the practices you should do. Exactly. It's putting it all in framework. So I recommend for everybody. You can get a digital copy. You know, you go to that website Mary sent you, and the money goes to the prison project. You know, so prison is not the real prison. Prison can be your hermitage. He quotes like this. He says in the book, you know, he says that these Tibetans, some of them, the older days, I think, in these mountains, there's a little hole in the wall, and it's a cave. And some of them are really strict. They seal up the cave. They seal it up. There's a little dark hole in the wall with a little tiny hole for those who need food, you know. And they spend years in there trying to get their realizations, undisturbed, isolated. Can you imagine? Then being in prison is an incredible opportunity. The kindness of those who put you in prison. I mean, this is the most shocking one. Being told that the wife who, you know, who accused you of murder, accused you, let's say, of doing something naughty and put you in prison, that how kind they are. So the whole of the tone of this book is the highest level of the Bodhisattva path, based on emptiness and this one of transforming problems. And without a background in that, unless you're something special like this woman, Sunny, who just had the karma off to be this way, it would be too shocking. It's too shocking. But, you know, Rinpoche, so many people love him. So many people devoted to him. We must not waste this rare and precious life. So then even if you have only one day left to live, this is people on death row, you know, and then identify suffering and its causes, then know how to end them. There's nothing to be attached to. There's an amazing chapter on attachment to one of his fellows, the 45-page fellow, because he's very attached to girls, you know, sex with women. It's common, not uncommon for blokes, unless you want other objects these days. We're very flexible these days. So nothing to be attached to. It's really emptiness, you know. Then without compassion, life is meaningless. That everything is merely labeled by the mind. It's an amazing chapter on emptiness. And then a long chapter about how you can show that Buddha Dharma is proved. You know, that's a shock to people. Then the second part is what to do. So the basis of all practice, study and meditate on the Lam Rim. He describes exactly. Living in vows is incredible. There's no karma that can't be purified. Recite the names of the 35 Buddhas. Recite the mantra of the Compassion Buddha. Practice Tong Len, giving and taking. Recite the mantra of Buddha Nam Gyalma. Recite the mantra from the Sutra of Great Liberation. Recite the sutras. Read and study the right books. And finally, think. So the whole thing is a perfect handbook for anybody. You don't have to be in prison. It's exactly perfect for everybody. I highly recommend it as a practical handbook that'll explain to you what to do when. Really and truly, it's amazing. It works beautifully. And there's a really good glossary, which is sort of lots of explanations that aren't necessarily covered in the book itself, you know. So that's the book. So let's look at this framework then. Let's look at this framework and why it's so shocking in our world, you know. So this is the first part. I think it's one of the first, isn't it? Oh, no, Charmaine's not there. Somewhere. Who is there? Shankar. Where's Shankar? Oh, so maybe, is this the first of our Heart Lama series? No? We've done some already.
I think this is first of the Heart Lama series, yes. Okay,
because at the moment now, Shankar's taken over from Mary, as you know, and Charmaine are working very hard on, and Mary has been the last 6-9 months, working on, as you can see, a brand new curriculum, a much more rich, multi-layered curriculum. So one of what the Heart curriculum, which is the FPMT course, then we've got this, what are we calling it, Shankar? The other one?
The supporting curriculum.
Supporting curriculum, right, that's right. All the other things that don't fit into that, but are linked to that, you know. And so one of these we've got is our Heart Lamas, having the books or the teachings of Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe, and having a special series, just introducing our Lamas, because many of you haven't met Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, and this is their center. So this is one of the first ones. It's so perfect, you know. Thank you.
Dawn is also teaching Door to Satisfaction.
Okay, perfect. That's wonderful. That's one of the Rinpoche's books that came out in '96. That was wonderful. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so let's look then at this attitude, which is the level Rinpoche is teaching it at, which is so shocking, as I said. This level of teachings that basically is at the Mahayana level, is the bodhicitta level. So therefore more advanced. Now I always repeat this, and I continually say it, it's necessary to hear this. We're very used to understanding any body of knowledge that you learn it incrementally. You enter into the lowest middle stuff, the lowest scope, the lowest stuff, the least difficult, math, music, anything, go to more middle, go to advanced, and then you graduate. We really get it. It's just we are brilliant at this. But it's so fascinating how as soon as we hear spiritual teachings, we lose all common sense. And it's very hard for us to realize that all the teachings are structured according to the level of the capability of the student, just like any body of knowledge. But it really takes us time. And I know when I first heard the Lam Rim, which is this presentation, I didn't know what Lama Zopa was talking about. I mean, it was so arcane, so weird. It took me years, even after when I first became a nun and I was editing in London, working for Wisdom, I was editing Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand by Pabonga Rinpoche in the 70s. I was editing it. I still didn't get the idea. What does he mean, incremental? So basically what it means is psychologically, you know, it's psychological development. Here we're not talking math development, music development, cooking development. I mean, you can be a pedophile and be mean and nasty person, but be a good cook. But here we're talking about the person. So this is a course that you enter into the Lam Rim that turns you into the person called a Buddha. So it's internal progression, internal knowledge, internal, it's psychological. That's what the Lamrim is. So when we really get the essence of that, then we begin to understand where all the teachings of Buddha fit. You read a vast 1,000-page book of Buddhist teachings. You open up any page randomly. And the Lama say this from the very beginning, but I didn't get it. And you just point to one sentence. You will know exactly, is that lower scope, middle scope, great scope, Vajrayana, because it's got to fit. If you open up a music book, think of this. You open up a music book randomly, and if you are studying music, you'll go, that's grade 12, I'm only in grade 5, or that's grade 2, I'm in grade 7. You'll know exactly where that is, and you know where you fit in relation to it. The Lama say this all the time, but it took me a while to understand that, because it means psychological progress, your own internal progress. So surprisingly to us, compassion is more advanced. As His Holiness says, compassion is not enough. You've got to have wisdom. So meaning university, compassion is the great scope, they call it. I like to call it university. Not joking. Then obviously you can't do university if you haven't graduated through high school and junior school. It's sort of logical. But it's hard for us to hear this here. Because we just hear all these teachings as kind of theoretical, as philosophical. We can't hear the experiential application of it. But that's what the Lamrim is. It's a brilliant art teacher way back, 11th century something, back in India. Dharma came to Tibet. Dharma was flourishing. It was like since the 7th, 8th century, totally become Buddhist country. But you can see they kind of lost the plot a bit, I think. There was no kind of overview of a coherence of where each piece of teaching, each practice fit in relation to the others. That's when a coherent body of knowledge does for you, doesn't it? Like if you just got a book of random recipes, the first recipe is the most advanced one, the 6th recipe is a simple one, you get confused. You need order and kind knowledge holders of cooking, knowledge holders of music, knowledge holders of Dharma have presented the teachings in an orderly, incremental, experiential level. It's so logical when we think about it. But initially it takes us time, especially reading arcane 15th century, 10th century, Indian and Tibetan commentaries. I mean, because Buddhism had been untouched up over the other side of the Himalayas there, these Tibetans, I mean, when Lama Zopa starts teaching Dharma, now he's a bit different because he's more modern, but you get a classic presentation of Buddhist teachings from a Tibetan mouth. It's exactly the same as they teach in the 14th century because they're using the same texts. They use the same language. It's very fascinating. The Tibetan translators created a language just for the Dharma, and that was back in the 8th century. It hasn't changed. So it's still living like in sort of, it's like using Shakespearean language. We think we'd all laugh if we spoke like that. But their religious language, their philosophical language hasn't changed. Then you got the honorific, then you got your regular. Everything for us is regular. So we've radically changed the way we say things. That's why Lama Yeshe was such a miracle. When he could see us poor hippies, completely hopeless, couldn't understand these weird, arcane 10th century concepts. So he put it into simple language. It's like a miracle, Lama Yeshe. I mean, I've never ceased to be amazed at how amazingly brilliant he was at choosing words to communicate with us, So this level that Rinpoche is teaching at to these prisoners who wrote to him, they requested, he didn't shove it down their throats. He responded to their requests. It's, all of it. So all the Dharma's there. He's done all the purification. That's junior school. He's got all the things about the mind. That's high school. But he's also got the emptiness and bodhicitta, which is the highest level. But especially the tone throughout it, especially in the first part. This whole thing about, it's basically based upon the Buddhist understanding of how things don't have an intrinsic nature. We can spend the rest of the day talking about emptiness because this is the basis. So there's two things that run through this more advanced level. The more advanced level of the bodhicitta path, about the compassion wing, and the more advanced level on the compassion wing, the more radical level of exchange, they talk about of transforming problems into happiness, seeing bad things as good. So the first question has to be, why on earth would I want to do such a weird thing? This is that would be the reasonable question. Because on the face of it, we know very well, and we learned this in high school, we know the view we have of the world now is through the lenses of attachment. And attachment is this bottomless pit of emotional hunger that runs the show every millisecond. This is not how we talk in modern psychology. You go to Charmaine as your psychologist, she will not tell you about that unless she sneaks it in and puts it in Jung or Freud's terms, making it sound modern. Because if your patient says, oh, what's the source for that, Charmaine. Well, that's Buddha 2,500 years ago. Should be chucked out of her psychological association. She's got to sneak it in and around. So the Buddha's idea is that we're driven by all these neurotic states of mind. Now, we know we have neurotic states of mind, but we think they come from mummy or daddy or the brain or the bad nuns or somebody else. So we look at the outside world to find the problem. Buddha's so direct. This is something that definitely takes us time. Buddha is so direct, it's shocking. He says, look at the mind. Don't worry about what your mother did to you. She might have been mean. I'm not arguing with you, but don't worry about that. Just look at your mind. That's when you're going to learn everything. And this is so direct, but it takes us such a long time. So basically, when we understand in high school, in the middle scope of the whole practice of this packaging of the teachings, we have to learn to know our mind. We learn to distinguish between the neuroses and the virtues. And this too is unique to the Buddha. You don't get that in neuroscience. You don't get that in modern psychology. No one would dare say negative and positive states of mind. Sounds like judgmental, sounds punitive. We don't want to sound like that. So this is the Buddha's view. It's very clear. And the neurotic ones are the source of our pain. They're the source of our pain, and they're the source of why we therefore do dumb things to harm others. So that implies the first level of practice. Control the servants of your mind, control your body and speech, live in vows, have a disciplined practice every day, control your mouth, don't jump on every partner you feel like it, don't shove every piece of cake in when you feel like it. You discipline your body and speech, you know. This is a miracle. Then you go to high school and you start to look at the mind. You start to identify the delusions, the neuroses, the misconceptions, the painful, disturbing states of mind. This is the fundamental job of being a Buddhist. And you distinguish them from the virtues, which are our saving grace, love and compassion, intelligence and kindness. They're all there, but the others loom large. We know that. So naturally, when attachment doesn't get what it wants, that's aversion. So why would you think most people in prison are unhappy? Well, they're horrible, shitty places. They are ugly. Most of them I've been to are pretty ugly. Unless that one in Norway, I wouldn't mind going there. But most are pretty horrible. They cost your senses. So the natural response of any normal person would be to have aversion. This is disgusting. The smell is horrible. It's ugly. You're treated badly. People insult you, harm you, abuse you. Your roommates could be a psychopath, you know. So straight away, it's natural and inevitable and natural that you would have aversion. But the way we interpret in the West is, how dare these prisons be so ugly, how shocking. And you should say that. And you should meditate. You should get out there and politically act, you know, to try and change prisons. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it's still a fact that the mind is the one that does the interpreting of it. But we so take it for granted that it's natural to be angry if you're treated badly, and it's natural to be happy if you're treated nicely. And it is natural, but we mean by natural is that you'd be unnatural if you didn't respond like this. So when we hear about Sunny, he wasn't even a Buddhist, he's a nice Jewish hippie back in the 70s, hitching with a hubby and their kids, get picked up by two blokes. The police stop the blokes and the blokes kill the cops and blame the hippie. So they're on death row. This nightmare, you can't conceive of this nightmare, you know. Her children were given to her parents. The parents got killed in a car accident. She lost the kids to the state. Her husband got executed. She went to the execution. His head burst into flames. You can't imagine a more nightmarish life, you know. She's in this cell for years on her own with a Bible. But she said, I knew I had a choice. I knew I had a choice, meaning she could choose to think differently. This is the miracle of the Buddhist teachings. Even up to high school, when you learn about these delusions, you don't learn to do that yet. You just learn to identify them. Then you get to the highest level, the Bodhisattva path, and now you start to remove even more of these delusions, which are what are creating the barriers between you and others. And then at the most advanced level, you learn about emptiness, that nothing has an intrinsic nature, that it's how you label it. So even the whole level of teachings at this highest level of being able to transform shitty, horrible experiences into something good. How do you do that? By reinterpreting it. When we can get that, we are just about liberated. It's the miracle. Now we know this. Buddha didn't create this. Buddha is not a creator. He didn't make this up. He's got no copyright on it. He's just good at it. This is his expertise, you know. We get this already. Even we say in life, oh yes, you know, people have problems. We can see them having problems. Life is a challenge. Don't see it as a problem, see it as a challenge. That's exactly the view. It's exactly what Sunny did. And that's exactly what he's teaching these men in this prison. That's exactly Buddha's teaching at the Bodhisattva level, based on emptiness and bodhicitta. So the great bodhisattvas who controlled their body, controlled their speech, controlled their mind, done the junior school, high school, are really kind of profound already and marvelous. They are now ready, ripe and ready to start to radically rip out the delusions. So if okay, this is the logic. If delusions are the cause of your suffering, and if delusions are not intrinsic to your being, and if they can be removed, then obviously you have to know when they arise. So what's the quickest way to know that you've got anger is to have a person who's mean to you. If you're sitting there relaxed, having everything lovely and no one ever disturbs you, you can lull into this lie that everything is wonderful and you're such a nice person. But check the person who makes you, even your husband snoring. You thought you were so patient and you want to kill him. So naturally we believe the snoring is a problem. And it is a problem. I mean, it is something disturbing your peace. It is true, he is snoring. It's true, the prison is horrible. It's true, you were accused wrongly of murder. All these are facts. These are facts. But the response to it, and this is the more subtle approach the Buddha takes, and that demands lots of practice, is that you can, that's what Sunny said, I decided I couldn't change anything out there, but they couldn't take my mind from me. It's like it's miraculous, So she changed her mind. So what's the consequence of that? What's the point? Why do it? To be holy? No. Because guess what? When your mind is virtuous and clear and not angry and not jealous and not depressed and not freaked out and not panic-stricken, that's when you're happy, baby. So who do you think is the beneficiary of this practice? You. When you see that, it will be nutty not to do it. But look how hard it is to reinterpret that snore. That's just a snore. Can you imagine being accused of killing 2 policemen? Your husband's had his brains burst into flames on death row and they're innocent and his children lost to her. Her children lost to her. Can you imagine that? But she was able to change her mind. Why? Because she wanted to be happy and not suffer. That's the miracle. It's logical, but it's so hard to hear it. Because our view is full of vindictiveness. That's wrong. What do you mean I should change my anger? He's the one who should change. What do you mean I'm allowed to be angry, we'll say. I'm allowed to be jealous. I'm allowed to be depressed. That's exactly the view we have in our world. This sense of vindictiveness, this kind of punitive view, this victim view. I don't want to sound shocking. This is such a tremendous level of practice. It's a tremendous level of practice. And don't wait till you've been accused of murdering 2 policemen unfairly before you start doing it, people. Start dealing with the snore, This is the point. These poor guys in prison, these young working class or old working class guys, never heard a word of religion, dharma, nothing, jumping in the deep end of this dreadful places, treated like an animal, going mad in their minds, looking desperately for something. This is the advice Rinpoche gives them. It's amazing. It's the kindness of his letters, you can't imagine. It's the hardest level. But the thing is, when you jump in the deep end like that and you're innocent and in a cell 23 hours a day and your husband's been executed and your parents have got insurance of debt and your children are lost, you only got 2 options. You either go mad or you start practicing pretty quick. You can't afford just to start quietly watching your breath. That's baby preschool, junior school. You've got to jump in the deep end. And we know that. You don't, people, when suddenly problems happen, you get cancer overnight. And there's no warning. I'm coming in 6 weeks, get ready. No, it just comes. Your husband leaves you. We don't, because we're lulled into believing we're happy. There's not being cynical. When we understand the second kind of suffering in high school, when we understand the second kind of suffering, which is the suffering of what we call happiness, it's really hard to hear. And what we call happiness is basically when attachment gets what it wants. What we call happiness is like the happiness of a junkie. The temporary cessation of the pain when you get the fix. That's how we get, that's what we know as happiness. But because it's so more subtle and more nuanced, we can't see it like that. And we don't interpret it properly. So as long as we seem to be getting what attachment wants, we think we're happy. And then the disaster happens and we're not prepared because we haven't worked on our minds. So start with the small things. Start with a snore. Hear it differently. I remember one time, I remember, I've heard this from different people, but one example, one Lama, who was his name? One Lama said this story. One of his students came in and talked about how, he'd went to this, somewhere he was on the way home on a journey at night and he stopped off at a motel to stay the night and he heard the sound of the ocean. He was so happy he was not by the ocean. This lovely sound of the ocean. It was so nice and it lulled him into sleep. And he woke up in the morning, it was the freeway, not the ocean at all. That's how, because you interpret. That is a really good example. You listen to the distant roar of a freeway. That is exactly the same as the distant roar of the ocean. So it proves how we label things, you know. You know, I heard people talk about these machines that are called white noise. I mean, for me, it's like a freeway. I think people are insane. They think it's nice. It just really proves how we label everything. This is so obvious. But when it comes to unfair things, we think it's like, what do you mean I should change? What do you mean I should interpret it? I'm allowed to be angry. This, you see, shows the depth of our suffering, the depth of our victim mentality, the depth of our anger. Victims, I'm sorry, is completely driven by anger. This sounds very, very shocking. This sounds too shocking for our culture. But you analyze when you are upset about something, when someone's harmed you. You are angry, definitely. But then if you feel cowed by it, you never think of that as anger, but you analyze. That's why you're suffering. You're suffering because, and all Buddha's saying is, yes, the bad thing happens. Yes, you're on death row and it's inappropriate. Yes, it is a snore. But it's how you interpret it. That's the key to success or failure, happiness or suffering. It's so technically accurate. We can prove it a dozen times a day, but it's too hard to begin to want to practice like that because everything in us is raising to the surface. How dare that happen to me? I don't deserve it, you know. So that's why we've got to do the lower scope and middle scope, the junior school and high school, the unpacking and unraveling of our own mind and controlling our body and speech first. It's impossible to leap into this level of the compassion wing, the seeing problems is good. If we can, we've done some inner work in the past, amazing. But if we can jump in the deep end and start to do that, but it takes courage to even want to change your interpretation of the snore. You have to want to hear it differently. That's what Sunny was capable of, like a miracle. Like I said, she wasn't a Buddhist or anything. She had yoga. But it's so clear this is more advanced. If you have got anger and your uncontrolled speech and, you know, you wake up and hear the snore, come on, sweet, you do it nice. Oh, sweetheart, you're snoring, and turn him over. It sounds like you're being kind. No, you're not. It's anger, but gentle. And eventually after 5 years, it'll be anger. You'll kill him. So if you can so this is the thing about controlling your speech first. If you control the speech first, which demands already some mental work, hard mental work, to even make yourself decide to control your speech, to decide to control your punch. This is a miracle of practice. Most of us as Buddhists, being 30, 40 years Buddhists, still haven't controlled that one, still haven't got that one down. That's junior school. Then high school, because you've controlled your body and speech, the servants, now you can see the mind, you can swim in the mind, see the delusions, identify them. This is a miracle of practice. This is a miracle of practice. Then you can get to the bodhisattva path and get some bodhicitta. And then you can do the one in that process, get this one of transforming problems. And so what does that mean? It's so simple. It's nothing secret. It means every time something happens that your attachment doesn't want, every time something happens in the day that your attachment doesn't want. And once you realize back in high school that the way you frame what happens in the day is in the lenses of whether you like it or not. But we think it's all coming from the outside, you know. No, it's your interpretation. You've got your attachment lenses on, things will appear lovely, you know, and you'll exaggerate the deliciousness of your lovely boyfriend. And we know if you're really attached, look at a baby. Look, when mummies are attached to their babies, it's just as well they are. My mother would have killed me if she weren't attached to me. Even smelling the shit of a baby for a mother makes her happy, doesn't it? Susie, is that right? Did you like the smell of the shit of your kids? What about you, Jamie? Did you make their shit make you happy as well? No, mother's got it even more. I think even the smell of the shit of the baby is delicious, right? Isn't that a good example? But isn't it just as well you're attached to them, Susie? You would have killed them otherwise, right? Because who's got that much love and compassion? Nobody. So luckily we've got a bit of attachment that makes the love and compassion easier. So even when you've got real attachment for somebody, and this is a wonderful chapter in Rinpoche. I have to read Rinpoche's book. Okay, I'll entertain you now with Rinpoche's teachings. Where is it? I'll find it here. His teaching on attachment, so clear, so delicious, and it's implying emptiness. Of course it is, you know. Okay, I'll read you a bit from Rinpoche's chapter on there's nothing to be attached to, which implies emptiness as well as attachment. Let me find it for you. It's wonderful. I'll just read you bits. Rinpoche's so direct. He's so funny. Where is it? There is nothing to be attached to. Page 55. Page 55. Page 55. Here we go. He's just wonderful. This is the 45-page guy. Okay. Attachment is a deep habit. You mentioned in your letter that the habit of attachment to sex, how difficult it is for you. So of all the delusions, you have to understand how unbelievably strong the habit of attachment is. The habit of attachment to sex, desiring sex, didn't begin in this life. It's from past lives. In fact, it didn't have a beginning. It's beginningless. From beginningless rebirths, you've had this mind habituated to attachment to the opposite sex and to sexual pleasure. Of course, it's not necessarily always the opposite sex. I'm not including lesbians or gays. This is just a general explanation. And once you understand the reasoning, the basics are the same, whether you identify as a heterosexual, gay, or lesbian, etc. But I want to say more, just to add here. This is me talking now. When we understand the different components, like the technology of samsara, it's very powerful. How things works. You're born, let's say, like a friend of mine. I use the example of my friend Panos in Greece. He gave me permission to tell this story. I always used to tell it, and I feel guilty, but he said, it's okay, you tell it. He's always been very attached to girls, girl shapes. So when he's a little boy, 6 years old, walking down the street of Athens with his Greek Orthodox mummy, sees a poster at a cinema of a half naked lady, and he says, "Mummy, why is my penis standing up?" Of course, his mother was mortified, but the cinema lady made a joke. He remembers this. Oh, he'll be a lady killer when he gets older, you know. So let's look at the logic of this. This is what Roger is telling us. That because of his familiarity with attachment, and this is emptiness, the whole point, to attachment to girl shapes. You know, whether you're as a dog, a cat, a mouse, you name it, doesn't matter what life, same logic. The girl shape, you know. Like those birds, I saw a whole movie about these birds, these male birds, the fuss and bother they go to get a girl. The boys are like completely divine with color and feathers. They do all the dancing and the singing. They build the houses, and the girls look ugly and boring, you know, but they got to get this girl to win this girl over, you know. But the girls are pretty boring, but in the other, it's usually the opposite, isn't it, among the humans? The girls got to look cute. So anyway, what happens is he's born as a human. This is a miracle. He got the result of good karma. But then he's got a tendency, lots of tendencies in his mind. My friend Panos, he's got good tendencies. He's kind, generous, loving, but he's got attachment, the attitude in his mind of attachment to girl shapes. So what happened is this: he doesn't know. He's never thought about girls until he's 6 years old. He doesn't know about his little thing down there between his legs. He hasn't thought about it. Mummy certainly hasn't taught him. But what happens? He meets the condition. The condition is a female shape, and that indicates this. So what happens is, because of the familiarity with that, and this is everything. This is how come we come born into this life. We're programmed with past habits, because everything's stored in our mind as a habit. So he was strong familiarity with girl shapes, and attachment. So with girl shapes, with contact with girl shapes, that's in his mind, programmed like a habit, like a memory. But then suddenly he sees the girl shape on the wall, and up his little thing stands. So there's all logical explanations of this in the Vajrayana teachings about the wind energies and the mind and the connection. It's all very delicious. It's very wonderful how it explains this, you know. But the fact is, what happens is, because of the past familiarity, whether it's eating cake, whether it's killing people, whether it's fishing, whether it's jumping on girls for sex, it's all the same, good or bad habits. It's the familiarity from the past of having done it before. So what happens is then, equal to the strength of his habit to be attracted to girl shapes is the amount of pleasure that's then that instant, the next millisecond, pleasure is triggered. Happy feelings, pleasant feelings. The stronger the habit, the more pleasant the feelings. And then that next millisecond, and all this happens as if it's together, attachment kicks in and paints a divine picture. All this happens in a millisecond. So he is locked into that habit, isn't he? Because we all want pleasant feelings. This is the bottom line. All we want is pleasant feelings. All we want is happy feelings. So obviously for him, logically, he deduced that girl shapes caused it. So the girl shape is the habit in his mind, familiarity with it. He sees the girl shape, it triggers the memory, it triggers pleasure. We all want pleasure, and then attachment kicks in and enhances it, makes it even more delicious than it really is. And then he's locked into it. He's got to keep getting girl shapes. So when he was about 12, he told me, he was saved up his first pocket money. He didn't go buy a toy train. He went to prostitutes. I'm not criticizing. I think he's about 50 something now. He's calmed down a bit, maybe 60 already. But this is how all habits work. So whether you've got the habit to be kind to people, it's the same thing. Whether you've got the habit to kill people, torture people, it's the same habit from the past. And then pleasure kicks in. The extent of the habit is the extent of the pleasure. And that's what traps us. Nothing wrong with pleasure, but we make the mistake that killing fish or jumping on girls is the cause of the pleasure, because then attachment kicks in and makes the girl or the fishing or whatever the activity is totally gorgeous. This is what keeps us locked in samsara. So, of course, it's not necessarily, okay, so there's back to shame. Attachment to sex is a causative phenomenon. It's an impermanent phenomenon. It arises in the mind because of the habit from having done it before. I mean, this is hardly rocket science, is it? That's karma, baby. Whether you wake up in this life and you can play piano like Mozart, it's because you've done it before. Whether you kill like a really good murderer at the age of 4, you know, and some little people are, we don't like to think it, but it's true. It's because you've done it before. It's just habit. That's why you've got to have a basis for judging whether your habits are negative or positive. This is the first step, isn't it? So it arises in the mind because of the habit of having done it before. And then there's a condition. This is the point. For Panos, he had the habit in his mind, but it didn't ripen until he saw the picture. That's the condition, the object of attachment. In your case, the body of the opposite sex. Every time attachment arises, attachment to anything, it leaves an imprint on the mental continuum, like planting a seed, and that causes attachment to rise again. So that leads to the action. Then again, the same problem. The action leads imprints in the mental continuum. We become more and more familiar with a habit and end up engaging only in non-virtue. So if you've got good habits, and eventually all a Buddha is a person who's programmed to perfection in good habits. Now it's effortless. That's what we're aiming for. All our thoughts and actions are imprinted on our consciousness. There are two things: imprints in our mind, which is like karma, left by attachment, and imprints left by ignorance. Okay. So ignorance is the root delusion. Attachment is the main branch delusion. Because of attachment, you cling to the person's body. And because of ignorance, you hold onto it as real. So you've got two delusions: the root delusion, and then on the basis of this attachment. Attachment's job is to make her look more gorgeous than she really is. And then because of ignorance, that causes you to believe that that deliciousness is intrinsic in her. That's the deeper delusion, and they're working beautifully together. Because of attachment, you cling to the person's body. And then because of ignorance, you hold on to it as real. That's the root delusion. I talk more about this in chapter 11. This is Rinpoche's chapter on emptiness. This is why it's difficult to separate from the person. This is why it's difficult to separate from the person, from the object. Because one of the functions of attachment is you think of it all the time. Look at our minds. I mean, we just think about cake all the time. Aren't we fortunate? It's not trying to torture people. One of my friends on death row in Kentucky, Mitchell, my friend there, who's Buddhist, told me, and I know this fellow, he said, Robina, he thinks of torture all the time. So can you imagine how relieved you are, what fortunate you are? You just have to think about cakes. Can you imagine the torture? I want to torture all the time. That's why we should, when we understand karma, you have compassion for people. Yeah, protect him. I'm glad he's not out there killing and torturing people. Oh, I'm not glad he's on death row because he's safe. There are so many imprints in our mind. Our consciousness records imprints like a camera does. The mental continuum is like a film that from beginningless rebirths has had countless imprints put on it by attachment. It is beginningless, like the chicken and the egg. Due to past imprints, attachment arises, which leaves further imprints. You see the opposite sex, then you project, then you believe. So bad enough, Lama Zopa says, that the delusions cause the thing to appear wrongly. The attachment over-exaggerates her deliciousness. The ignorance causes the deliciousness to be intrinsic in her. Bad enough we see it like that, but the killer is we believe it is true. That's the paralysis. If we can begin to not believe in our karmic appearances, even if we're still stuck in the habit of thinking cake is more delicious than it is, and you catch and say, no, it's not true, you're putting an atomic bomb under that attachment. This is a powerful practice. Even to the highest yogis, before they become Buddha, things appear to come from the outside to them, but they don't believe it. They don't believe it. They use the analogy of like one of these great, they used to have magicians that could conjure horses, for example, in the front. So they're there with the audience. The yogi, the magician who has conjured the horse, sees a horse. The audience see the horse. The difference is the audience believes it a horse, and the yogi and the magician knows it's just an illusion. That's what we have to practice doing. This is a miracle of practice, to not believe in what we're seeing, not believe in our karmic appearances, what Rinpoche is talking about. This is why all this is kind of implied. It's all driven by emptiness. Mental continuum is like a film that beginningless rebirth has had countless imprints put on it by attachment. It's beginningless, like the chicken and the egg. Due to past imprints, attachment arises, which leaves further imprints. You see the opposite sex, then you project, then you believe. The imprint of attachment is actualized, and again, attachment arises. This habituation makes our future lives so difficult. Future lives means not just one life, but all the future lives. With these habits, our suffering of samsara has no end. It's endless. Not only endless lower realm suffering, but endless suffering in human rebirths as well. Again and again, you engage in all these negative actions with attachment. There'll be no end to other sentient beings complaining about you, and no end to the police and the judge and others having put you in prison. There'll be no end. Why? Because of the habituated mind of attachment. It is mentioned by the Buddha in the Sutra of 100 Actions that with which we are habituated is always made familiar by non-virtue. Because of that, again, one relies on non-virtue and engages in non-virtue and follows non-virtue. Because of that, again, in the future, one relies on non-virtue and engages in non-virtue and follows non-virtue. Think about this quotation. Remember it every day, again and again. With attachment, there is no wisdom, no compassion. There's no freedom, no peace when you are overwhelmed by attachment. The mind is so uncontrolled, it leads to sexual misconduct and other negative actions. Because the motivation is non-virtuous, the actions become non-virtuous, which causes suffering in the lower realms. And because the mind involved in sexual attachment is totally unconscious, totally confused, there's no compassion. This means that the motivation is only self-cherishing thought, pleasure for oneself. Analyze the body. There's nothing to be attached to. When we're attached to someone, we're usually attached to their body. Of course, it's not necessarily always the body. Sometimes we're attached to the voice, a sing-song voice, let's say, or to their knowledge or intelligence. Sometimes we are attached to their personality, their sense of humor, even their smell. When it's the body, attachment has a lot to do with the face. You believe there's a truly existent face, not merely labeled by the mind. This projection exaggerates a beautiful hairstyle, beautiful nose, beautiful cheeks, nice this, nice that. But it's just your interpretation. Your mind makes up beautiful. This is so logical. This is me now. But for example, panos. Anybody. You're in love with somebody, they feel like an angel. Then you get bored after a while, you just get fed up. And you look at her one day and go, who's this ugly person in my bed? She's not even a few months older. She's exactly the same face, exactly the same everything. It's obvious because your mind has changed. You know, we never realize that. And Rinpoche points this out. Your mind makes up beautiful. First you exaggerate, then attachment arises. Then you believe this is beautiful. Not only does your mind label it that, but you believe it. Attachment clings to that view and it's hard to separate from it. This shows that from the object side, there is nothing to be attached to. It is a projection of your own mind. The object your ignorance holds as real, the body you're attached to as beautiful, doesn't exist. Ignorance holds onto it as not merely labeled. Then, appearing beautiful, it becomes the object that you're attached to, and you sink into it like oil absorbing into water. Perhaps you think the skin is beautiful, but if you look at the skin under a microscope, it will appear differently than without a microscope. It looks like mountains. There's no truly existent skin. It's just a collection of cells. There's no beautiful skin from the side of the skin. Not even the slightest atom is there from its own side. How you see the skin is according to your view. It comes from your mind. It's your mind's own projection. Now, if you take off the skin, if the skin is separated from the body and you put aside, suddenly there's nothing to be attached to. Without skin, there is no way to be attached to the rest of the body. Without skin, it would be shocking. It would be incredibly shocking. Let's say the body you're attached to smells like poop. The same body. Earlier on, Rinpoche said it was the first time he ever used poop. So he explained it earlier, but now he's already said it. It smells of poop. We don't say poop in Australia. I forget what we say in Australia. Probably something more blunt. Poo, we say poo, that's right. Polite is poo, I think in English as well. You smell poo. You say poop in America. So let's say the body you attach to smells of poop. The same body, the same shape, the same style of hair, same nose, lips, but it smells. You wouldn't be attached to it then, would you? Or let's say there is blood coming out of the body. There is certainly no attachment to that. In fact, you'd be frightened. That's why men can't stand ladies' blood coming out. They have a complete panic attack. They think you're a devil. They burned you at the stake. God, we're so peculiar. Of course, they've been girls in the past. I don't blame them. It's their own problem. We're all the same. There's also attachment to the organ of the opposite sex. That is due to imprints from past lives. the imprint left on the mind by attachment to the opposite sex. This time you are a male with a penis, but in the next life you become a woman, let's say, and your karmic view of what you're attached to might now be the man's organ. So there are some of this is some of the logical reasons to prove that there is nothing from the body side to be attached to. We need to understand that there's nothing coming from there. It's logical when we hear it. We're trapped in these views. The objects of our attachment change because our view changes. Also, the object that we're attached to now does not always remain the object of our attachment. This happens for everybody, whether they have received teachings on meditation and have consciously practiced seeing the object differently or not. One day, the object no longer seems attractive to us. We know this. Another case to consider is this. For a person who isn't a lesbian or isn't gay, there wouldn't be any attraction to someone of the same sex, would there? But if, let's say, they become gay or lesbian, now they have a view that they didn't have before. The mind changes its projection. Or let's say you're not attached to a particular person, and then after a while, they're very kind to you, nice to you. They give you lots of gifts. Whatever you want, they give you. Now, even though there's no attachment before, all of a sudden, your view changes. Suddenly, they appear beautiful to you. They become an object of attachment. Now your view is totally different. Before that, you see, the karma of seeing that person's body as beautiful, the imprint left by attachment projecting the person's body as beautiful, had not ripened. Now, suddenly, today, the karma ripens. Suddenly, this unbelievably strong desire for that person's body arises. There is a sudden, huge change in your mind. Lots of people talk this way. One of my favorite sections in the New York Times, I read it. It used to be only on Sundays, but now with digital, it's all week. Is the wedding pages, or the love pages now, they call it. There's always stories of people, how they get married, how they met. And one of the common stories is they were friends for years, 32 friends, and 32 years they're friends, and one day they fall in love. One day attachment comes in and makes them look ridiculously delicious. So they get all these excited feelings and now they get married. That's what we do. We make it all up. Stop being cynical, just being analytical. Doesn't mean you can't use it. It's not going to chuck the baby out the bathwater. Attachment now exaggerates the beauty of their body, and you find it difficult to separate from the person. Again, that's one of the functions of attachment, is you can't stop thinking about them and you want contact all the time. Our mind makes things up, but we believe that we see but we believe that what we see has nothing to do with us. That's the heading. It's clear then that there's no beautiful body from its own side. It is a total mind creation. Your own mind creates the object. It does not exist from its own side. It came from the negative imprint left by attachment from the past. It is just the view of your karma. What you are attached to is only your own karmic view. Only what you think. You are attached to whatever your mind labels. You're attached to your own view, but you believe totally that this has nothing to do with you, that nothing came from your mind, that it came from the object of your attachment. This is a total hallucination. This is the nightmare of samsara. This is the essence of it. You need to see there is nothing from the side of the object. There is nothing existing from its own side. It is your own projection coming from your own mind, labeled according to your own karmic view. It is a concept made up by your mind. Always dissatisfied. The other problem with attachment is the dissatisfied mind. You're not satisfied with the pleasure you had before, so you desire more pleasure or better pleasure. The mind is never satisfied with the previous sensation. And the pleasure doesn't last, so you want to repeat the act again. There's always expectation, always looking for pleasure that will bring satisfaction. But no matter how many minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, or years you try for that, you will never get satisfaction. I remember one of those shows, when all the extreme habits of humans, and one was about people who eat a lot of food. And there's this one little girl who's like 400 kilos or something, or 400 pounds. In other words, never getting enough, never satisfied. And so her mother was so sweet. She said, oh, she's always been like this. She never felt full. That's what attachment is. I know that. I'm attached to food, This little girl, I vividly remember, you keep putting the food in the mouth and you check, are you satisfied yet? And I didn't know how to judge that mentally because I couldn't see the difference. We can't see the difference. That's that girl. She couldn't see the difference between mental satisfaction and physical. So you judge your satisfaction by having a stuffed stomach, don't you? Your mind is not satisfied. Your mind is actually very distressed, but you don't have any other way of judging. You keep eating until you can't eat further. We all recognize that. If you follow attachment, even in 1 billion years, you will never get satisfaction. You see, we hear this in a punitive way, but this is technical. This is scientific. It's not punitive. It's just it's observation of the people who've seen this, and they're explaining to us the suffering. Even if you owned the whole world, including the sun, the moon, and the planets, even if you possessed them all, still you wouldn't get satisfaction. You wouldn't feel full. You wouldn't be happy, basically. Satisfaction is a calm, quiet word for happy feelings. This dissatisfaction is the heaviest suffering, the biggest problem in people's lives in the West. In fact, the more you have, the unhappier you are. My mother used to say, in relation to food, the more you get, the more you want. This is the essence of what Buddha means by the suffering of change. In fact, the more you have, the unhappier you are. There's only suffering inside, no inner peace, no happiness. All this comes from the non-virtuous thought of attachment. But attachment can be removed. You can decide to see the body of the person as a dependent arising. Your view of the body is not something that is permanent. It's not something that you can't do anything about. It's not like that. Therefore, there's no question that with meditation on the teachings, you can stop attachment arising towards the object of your attachment, the body. That's the miracle. You see, especially for men, I would say, because it's very much more powerful. I'm not trying to be gross here, but it's true, because you have this thing between your legs that stands up and has its own life and is a direct indicator of what's going on in your head, you know? So you feel that, so we feel the physical is so powerful. We feel that you have no choice. It's got nothing to do with your mind. We just think it's some weird energy that just your physical takes over. No, listen to this. That girl you're so in love with, you faint with pleasure. All every bit of your body stands up. And then 6 weeks later, you can't stand the sight of her. Your thing will not stand up, I promise you. Or maybe with men it does. I don't know. Maybe you're just so. But get my point. Get the point I'm making. Of course, it's a physical condition. But when you understand the Vajrayana is we've got this subtle physical energy, the subtle winds coursing through our subtle nervous system. And all our states of mind are inextricably linked to those winds. So when your attachment is going berserk, of course it triggers on your physical. Of course little Panos' thing will stand up, because it's the physical energies of the winds connected to attachment which makes it berserk, and then the physical takes over. It's all explained in the Vajrayana. It's really wonderful. It's driven by the mind. That's why they say in the very beginning of teachings, if you're very attached to somebody and you don't want to be, you start to think of their disgusting parts of their body. But you know, I thought to myself, or even attachment to food, one of the techniques that Buddha says is start to see it as caca. I thought, I don't want to do that. But it's really quickly, you've got creative imagination, just to see your food as caca, which is what will be in 1 hour, then of course you won't be attached to it. So you've got to want to see it as caca, otherwise you'll keep getting attached to it. It won't take long to stop being attached to somebody when you start to peel away their skin, do a little creative imagination, visualization, peel away their skin, or have them, like Rinpoche says, smelling, or their poop coming out. You'll be disgusted. It'll be quick as immediate. Your little thing will stand down immediately. It's sort of logical, but we have to want to do it. We don't want to give up attachment. We don't want to stop feeling delicious feelings and having the pain of attachment. We can see that. So you can decide to see the body of the person. You know, your body is, so it's not something permanent. It's not like that. Therefore, there's no question that with meditation on the teachings, you can stop attachment arising towards the object of your attachment, the body. Then when you reach the levels of the path to enlightenment, such as the right seeing path and the path of meditation, there are 5 paths. There's different stages of realizations, you know, as you progress. There's no question that you can gradually cease the delusions altogether with the wisdom directly perceiving emptiness. Actualizing the right seeing path removes the intellectually acquired delusions, and then actualizing the path of meditation ceases the simultaneously born delusions. Recognize attachment when it arises in the mind. Of course, that's where you've got to catch it. When attachment arises, be aware of it. Be able to recognize what is happening while it's happening, knowing that it is your own mind labeling, then believing in it. This is my karmic view. What I am attached to is my karmic view. This is helpful. Then you are aware of the problems you are creating in your life that you didn't have before. It's kind of a shock to discover that there's no such thing there to be attached to. This helps to kick the habit. Meditating in this way is the method to make your mind free from desire, free from this habit that has continued from beginningless rebirths. You need to keep your mind immersed in this by meditating on it every day. Remember it again and again. Okay, that's the chapter. Very delicious, right? Any questions, folks? Time for questions.
Venerable Robina, I don't see any questions, but may I please screen share the cover of the book?
Sure thing, do that. Let's people look at it. Well, that's the website. Yeah, good. That's the website. Yeah, great. Okay, good, wonderful. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary. How kind. So no questions of any kind about what I've said. I'll keep talking. It's okay. So this attachment teaching, just to put it into framework, this is not the transforming problems yet. This is like high school where you learn about the mind and you're moving towards the ability to be able to transform it. Once you know it's this flexible thing, once you know it's not set in stone, once you know it's coming from your mind, then you're really prepared to then change the way you interpret things. You've got to go gradually, one step at a time, you know. In other words, if you're in the victim mode, you've never worked on your mind, and someone punches you in the nose, your practice is not to see this as good. You can't. You're not capable. You've got to first control your body and speech. You've got to understand karma. You've got to understand how you created it. You've got to understand how your mind works. You've got to unpack and unravel, understand attachment, how anger is the result when attachment doesn't get what it wants. There's a lot of work to do first. Then you can get to the compassion wing and do this radical approach of transforming your problems. It's incremental. You can't. It is a more advanced practice. Keep saying that. Keep remembering it. You've got to know where you're at. You've got to know where you're at. Don't give them all equal status. That's ridiculous. What other questions, people? No other questions? No other questions? Okay, I'm happy to keep going. Don't worry about it. So I think the next one's even great. With compassion. Okay, we'll read. Let's look at this one. That's another discussion. Let's look at the emptiness chapter, which leads on from attachment, actually. It's all in the same letter. So I split them into different chapters. The emptiness one comes on from this one, and which is the basis of our ability to know that we can label things differently, which is how come Sunny had that ability. She'd never heard of emptiness. She's not even interested in karma now. She doesn't care. It's obviously the imprints from her mind from the past, you know. She had this amazing ability to do this. She had done it before, obviously. Okay. Everything is merely labeled by the mind. This is the most advanced level of the emptiness teachings, you know. In one sense, it's easier to understand, but it is the most advanced. Okay. So now, the I cannot be found, nor can the attachment object or anything else. So not only is the object of attachment a concept, the I is also a concept. Me, I, person, they all come to the same thing. First of all, there's the I that is merely imputed by the mind, because there is the base, the aggregates, the association of body and mind. When the body is kept in prison along with the mind is dwelling within the body, then the mind simply labels, merely imputes, I am in prison. The mind merely imputes that, then believes it. The mind believes, I am in prison. I have been put in prison. In reality, if you analyze, there is no real I there that has gone to prison. Nobody can put that I in prison, because that I, which appears to us as real, as existing from its own side and is believed in, doesn't exist at all. That I doesn't exist at all. Nowhere can you find it. Neither the body is I, nor the mind is I. Of course, there's masses of background to this. You know, like tomes of commentaries behind these words. So we just hear the words and we have to study it, and the penny will drop one day. If you analyze, you will find that each of the aggregates, each of the parts of who we are, Buddha, one of his teachings, one of his sutras is on what they call the 5 aggregates. He broke us down into 5 component bits, you know. So each of these bits is not the I. Even the collection of the bits is not the I. The real I also cannot be found on the aggregates. All this is just a summary, as there is. This is like a person who understands E equals MC squared just summarizing their findings. You know, so that's what we've got to do, is the background to get to this conclusion. That real I cannot be found on the aggregates, which is the base. It cannot be found from the tip of the hair down to the toes. It cannot be found either outside the body or inside the body. It cannot be found. It exists nowhere, not in the sky, nor in the ground, nowhere. It cannot be found. So obviously, before we go further, this is why in the 4-point analysis they talk about in the Lam Rim, the very first point that we have to do in this 4-point analysis is establish crystal clear what we think this fantasy I is, because we've been believing it for eons. We have to identify exactly, they call it the object to be negated. This takes masses of clarity in thinking, you know. So, but by scientifically checking, you can see that it cannot be found. Scientifically checking means using reasoning. With wisdom, scientifically, what you realize after analyzing is that the I is totally non-existent. It is totally empty. By logical reasoning, it cannot be found. That emptiness is the ultimate nature of the I. That absence, that non-existence, the lack of that fantasy I, they're my words, cannot be found. That lack, that emptiness of that fantasy I is the very nature, the reality of how we exist. How the mind projects. How does labeling happen? In other words, what we have to do, I mean, every millisecond we're doing this. Even what I said before, every millisecond we see something, the pleasure arises, the attachment kicks in, the unpleasure arises, the aversion kicks in. This is all happening millisecond by millisecond, utterly and completely and spontaneously programmed. So this is like having to put slow motion onto all of these and unpack them, or put a microscope onto them, because you can't see it from the distance. This is the inner analysis we have to do. There's no question. There's no shortcut. Even more so for this one. So how does labeling happen? For example, if you ask yourself, what am I doing? You think, oh, I'm sitting, I'm talking, I'm meditating, sleeping, eating, whatever. So first, the mind sees the body and mind. Our mind sees the aggregates, our body and mind, and sees what action the aggregates are doing, the bits and pieces the body and mind are doing. The body's doing the action of sitting. The mind is doing the action of meditating. Then according to that activity, the mind makes up that label. Then second, right after that, because of the subtle negative imprint in our mind of grasping at two existence in the past, meaning countless lifetimes of total programming, the mind projects, decorates. Even though I am sitting is merely imputed by the mind, the next second, when what the mind has merely imputed appears back to us, it does not appear as merely labeled by the mind. It appears as not merely labeled by the mind. It appears as something real, as existing from its own side over there. Then we believe it. It is not only that our mind labels it, we believe it. So first there appears the real I that is really sitting, talking, sleeping, meditating. Then the mind imputes, I am sitting, I am talking. And then the mind immediately decorates, projects true existence, intrinsic existence, is adding me, onto the action. Not only the I appears as real, the action appears as real as well. Oops. The mind makes it real as existing from its own side. Whenever they say real here, it means that. Concrete, from its own side, out there, in and of itself, intrinsically, self-existently, inherently. These are all synonyms for the way we think things exist, but which they don't. This is the root delusion, the root lie. It is like this for all phenomena. We think everything is real because of the subtle negative imprint of grasping at true existence in our minds from beginningless lives. But in reality, everything is empty. The I is empty, meaning not this I doesn't exist. The aggregates don't exist. The senses, the real intrinsic ones, are empty, don't exist. The objects of the senses, the actions, everything is totally empty. There is no such thing as these phenomena. They don't have true existence at all. They don't have the slightest atom of true existence. All this is projected, false, a total hallucination. All this is totally non-existent. This emptiness of true existence is the ultimate nature of all phenomena. But Rinpoche says it later, but it doesn't mean there's no I. It doesn't mean there's nothing existing. It just means not from his own side. That's the nuanced piece we've got to unpack. That's the part that, if we don't understand that, we become nihilistic. Chuck the baby out of the bathwater. Oh, well, it's all empty, might as well die. Not like that. We create our own world. Basically, we create our own world. As we discussed before in relation to attachment to a person's body, you believe that the beautiful body exists from its own side. But that is totally wrong. If the beauty, this is the point, the logic, this is the proof, it's so easy. If the beauty existed from the own side of the object, not projected by your own mind, that person's body should be seen as beautiful by everybody, by every living being. Or even after 6 months and she's beating you and pooping all over you, you still think she's beautiful. No, it doesn't work like that. It's true, it's proof. When you compare different bodies, you will say that one is more beautiful than another, or that this one is ugly compared to that one. This makes it very clear that beautiful and ugly come from your mind. They don't come from the object side at all. If ugly and beautiful exist from their own side, every human should have the same view. Everybody should have the same appearance, but they don't. We label things, then believe in them. Let's make this point a little bit clearer. When you were a child, before you were taught the alphabet by your school teacher, you saw what was written on the blackboard as a drawing or a design. You didn't see that this is A, this is B, this is C. You didn't see those designs as those letters. At that time, all you saw was just a design. Once your teacher introduced you to A, B, C, D, your mind imputed A, B, C, D on those designs. Then you believed in those labels. Only after that was there the appearance of A to your mind. This is so true. I've got in front of me, I mention this sometimes, you can't see it, on the wall, this lovely Charmaine, it's a Om Mani Padme Hung in Tibetan. All these years, I swear to you, I've been watching Tibetan, looking at Tibetan letters, but I'm as thick as a post. I still can't read it. I see it and I vaguely go, it still looks like a design to me. It looks foreign. It looks distant. I don't see Om Mani Padme Hung. Even I repeat it, Om Mani Padme Hung. I can't remember it. It goes out in one ear and out the other. So I see only a design. I don't see Om Mani Padme Hung. This is proving it. And this is the point. If it were Om Mani Padme Hung on the wall, everybody would see Om Mani Padme Hung. Everybody would read Tibetan, Spanish, English, French, you name it. It's so obvious, but we can't see it this way. Now you can see that the A that you are seeing came from your mind. Your mind imputed A and believed in it. It started with that. The whole process started with that. It came from your mind. This is the whole way of approaching about emptiness at the subtlest level, which is merely labeled. Always the time we've been talking before is about looking for the I that's separate from the parts. That's a grosser level, but it leads you to this one. This is the ultimate one. But when this A appears to you, right after, this is the point, when the A appears to you, when not the shape, when you go, there's a shape, and then you go, oh, that's A. When A appears to you from that design, right after the mere imputation by the mind calling it A, it appears as if it is there on those lines, doesn't it? That's the point. Why is that? That is the big question. Why does it appear there on those lines? In other words, why does it appear as existing from its own side? As existing truly, intrinsically, inherently, in and of itself, self-existently, naturally, established from its own side. All these synonyms. Why? Because of the imprint of past ignorance grasping at true existence. It's not really complicated, the concept of habit, you know. Habit, that's it. Habit. You so believed in it for so long. So the lines are not the A, they are the base of the label A. This is a massive discussion, this one. Excuse me. Each line of the design is not A. Even all the lines together are not A, because all the lines together are the base upon which your mind imputes A. Okay, this is a discussion. We say, who are you? Oh, I'm Robina. That's not accurate. The correct answer is, I am the person known as Robina. I am the person labeled Robina. This is a really important thing to think and when you're doing the analysis in your mind. Like Lama Zopa when he nearly drowned, remember? That wonderful story I always tell, and I'll tell it here. 11:30, another half hour to go. Okay, it's the one, he was nearly drowning. He'd been recognized as a little boy. He'd been recognized as a little boy from, I'll tell the story now. He was recognized, he's a Sherpa, and he was recognized as a very little boy, as the reincarnation of the previous yogi, Kunsang Yeshe, who was known as the Laudo Lama, the radish Lama. He kind of, in his old age, this is common for Tibetan. This is the answer to you, Susie. This is a common thing among Tibetans. You spend their life being laymen and mummies and daddies, and they go to find their cave. Usually the boys, the mummies had to stay home and be the grandma, but the boys were allowed to run off and go into a cave. So it's not uncommon. Cave, not cage. So anyway, Lama Zopa, in the previous life, he was a little layman, a Nyingmapa. He'd go back and forth to Tibet trading salt or whatever they did, you know. And then he was a secret practitioner. And then he spent the last 20 years, he pulled out the radishes or the onions, I never know which it is, Laudo. And he chucked out the radishes and onions that were stored in this little hole in the wall. And he said it was given to him by Guru Rinpoche. So he chucked out the radishes and he moved in. That became his home. So he spent the last 20-something years of his life meditating there. Great Vajrayana yogi. So anyway, he passed away there. And being a great Vajrayana yogi, the logic is they completely control the death process and they're able to choose exactly their future life. They know exactly what they're doing. They're in charge of the process. So anyways, a little boy, he was born as this little boy down the road. No, I don't know what his name was when he was a little boy. His name now is Tibetan Zopa, but he got that name when he became a monk. I don't know what his first name was. But little Zopa, his sister, he's 6 years older, she told me, I'm supposed to be writing the biography of Rinpoche. I hope I do it before I die. I'm getting clear in my mind what it's got to be like. But anyway, I interviewed her and she said that when she was about 6, he was born. And she said he always acted very differently from the other people, the kids, you know. They were very poor, lived in one room with the cows and everything. So he would always sit on a box when he ate his meals. He'd sort of act differently. When he played games, he'd always play the game of being a lama, and he'd have pujas, and he'd make mud pie dorjis and mud pie bells and mud pie torma cakes. And he'd even announced that all his benefactors from his past life were coming to puja, you know. So he behaved very differently. So his mummy figured she better check with the local lamas, and they did the divination. And it came out, it would seem that he was the reincarnation of the Laudo Lama. So anyway, the other thing that always happened too was that he would, you know, he'd always disappear. As soon as mummy turned her back, little Zopa, he's up the hill with a little bare bottom, crawling up the hill where they know, the top of which is where the Laudo cave is. And they'd drag him home, you know, or they'd sometimes find him sleeping, again with his little bare bottom, sleeping on the resting place, halfway up this little spot where you sat and rested. Like they have in American roads where you can go off and sit to the side. What do they call them? What do they call those things on the American roads?
They're called rest areas.
There you go, rest areas. Same up here. It was a resting place, they called it, except it was walking up to Laudo Cave. It's just the same. So they'd find him there asleep, you know. So then drag him home. And as he got older, you know, his mummy would say, come home. He'd say, no, that is my home. So these little yogis, the lamas, the reincarnated lamas, they always say their mind is so clear, they can remember exactly who they were when they're little, but you lose that, you know, as you get older. Which is why I hear lots of stories of children remembering their past lives. Before too much conceptuality comes in, they can still recall it very vividly. So he was like that. So eventually she checked with the local lama, and they said yes, he was the reincarnation of the Laudo Lama. And then, anyway, eventually when he was about 8, he was sent off up the mountains, up 8 hours up the mountains to a place called Rowaling, with his manager, somebody, a monk or somebody, they call them managers. When you're turned over as a little tulku, you know, tulku. Tulku means emanation body. So anyway, he tells this story. I've told this story many times. It's a wonderful story, illustrating exactly what we're talking about, this point. And there's a river up this place, and there's this river, very turbulent, these rivers up there. And he sees these weird looking people, these pale face, pale eyes, straw-colored hair. Sounds like Swedish people, doesn't it? But white people in general. He never met white people before. And he wanted to meet them. So he bought his bowl of potatoes, and on this little rickety bridge, which is very rickety up there, and the water's very turbulent, but he's halfway across and he falls into the river. He wanted to meet these people. So this is the story. He said, he said, the head, this is my point now about I, you know, not I am Robina, I'm the person known as Robina. This is the correct statement, getting to the point which he's making. He said, the head kept coming to the surface for air. He didn't say, I came to the surface for air. The head came to surface for air. He saw his manager having a panic attack, running up and down the bank. And then he kept going down to the water naturally. And he said to himself, he said, then I said to myself, then I thought, the person known as the Laudo Lama is about to die. And then he said, I didn't know anything about emptiness, meaning in that life, until the age of 8, he never heard the words of emptiness, but obviously he was a yogi. You can't lose emptiness. He brings it with him. This realization is just naturally there. How can it not be? You can never lose emptiness once you've got it. He said, I didn't know anything about emptiness, but there was no fear. And this is the amazing thing, by the way, it's separate. That once you realize emptiness, once you've cut the belief in the fantasy I, and therefore cut all the nonsense branch delusions, there is nothing to cling to. There's no nothing to be attached to. It sounds nutty and bizarre to us. But to even hear the logic of this intellectually is very encouraging. So there's 2 ways we think the I exists. Two. One is we think there's a special little I in there that runs everything, like the owner, like the boss. Or we think the whole of me is I. And we have to just do arguments with both of those. That's the whole point, to break down this false analysis, to do this false. Hang on, please, just a minute.
I put these nice flowers over here. I don't know how I gave this.
Oh, okay, we're fine. Okay, so Rinpoche says, we'll go back to Rinpoche. Okay. Okay, if that base, those lines were already A. This is a really just point. Every line of the design is not A. And even all the lines together are not A. Because all the lines together are the base upon which your mind imputes A. So if that body was Lama Zopa, I am drowning. Your mind can't drown, only your body can drown. But he doesn't say, I am drowning. I'm so sorry, wait. I think I'm addicted to being sick. I think I just want your pity. It's not one thing, it's another, isn't it? They tell me it's the pollen in the, what's those trees here?
The juniper.
Juniper, that's right. Then I discovered even the poor old bees can't enjoy it because there's no flowers. That's what Shankar told me. I didn't know that. Anyway, juniper, the Tibetan doctors use juniper, so there must be some benefit. Hope the Tibetan doctors get hold of all the juniper before it goes away. So basically the thing is here, okay, if that body of Lama Zopa Rinpoche were Lama Zopa, as how we think, one of them, this is me, then why would you say, I have a body? There's 2 things, isn't it? I have a body. If your body were I, you'd just say I, and you'd mean the body. You wouldn't say I have a body. You wouldn't say that. My body, you wouldn't say that. If the lines were the A, you wouldn't say the A has that design. This sounds so silly and splitting hairs, but it's necessary to understand this. But also, this is really true. If that A, this is the point, if that A, those 3 lines were A in the lines, if it were intrinsically A, everybody who saw it would say that's A. I would already know for 45 years, after 45 years looking at Tibetan, that that's Om Mani Padme Hum. It would be evident from the first second, which means we'd all know French, German, Russian, Italian, every possible language in the universe, if it were intrinsically existing. But it's not. It's merely labeled. You have to learn it. If the base, those lines were already A, then the very first time you saw that design, before you were introduced to A, you would know that it is A. But the first time you saw it, you didn't see A, you just saw the lines. Only after you were introduced to it, your mind made up the label A, calling it that. Only then there was the appearance, the recognition, aha, A. Then you saw A. That very clearly proves the whole design is not A. It is the base to be labeled A. So I am the person known as Robina. But as Geshe Tekchok, my philosophy teacher, said, don't get all smarty pants and someone says, what's your name? Oh, I'm the person known as Robina. Oh, shut up and just say you're Robina. Relax. But in your own analysis, you must do this. Don't get fooled. I am Robina. How dare you harm me like that? So listen, you people, it's time for questions. I'm going to stop reading now. I've not stopped talking for an hour and 40 minutes. Now you've got 20 minutes left to ask questions. Come on.
Please unmute or raise your hand in the participant panel so we know you have a question.
And ask anything at all. It doesn't have to be about emptiness, but anything at all about what I've just discussed so far. The prisoners, the teachings, Rinpoche's book, whatever you like, anything I've said, anything you want. Please ask. Have a discussion with me. If not, I'll just have to keep talking, won't I? Nothing. Okay. Yes,
Mary,
yes, dearest Mary.
Hello, I just wanted to say what a valuable resource this is. I can't imagine putting together all of Rinpoche's letters into a tool, into a toolkit. And I also find that the takeaways, like the remember points,
yes,
are really, really helpful. So I encourage people to get this book. It's a great resource. Thank you so much.
It's true, and it's really unusual because all this information which Rinpoche gives in this random ad hoc way in letters, it actually is not usually how books are published. It's true, isn't it, Mary? All this back in the second part, what to do, it explains exactly how to put into practice the first part, which is the way to think, the view of karma, the view of emptiness, the view of compassion. And it just gives the practical daily advice. It lays out what a practice is. So it's highly recommended. It's a hidden jewel, actually. I mean, if you think it's a book for prisoners, you're really mistaken. You know? And that's the problem with it. It looks like that. So we think it's not for me. Complete mistake. You're absolutely right, Mary. What else, people? Any old thing? Yes, somebody. Who?
Go ahead, Nancy.
Hi, Venerable Robina, it's Nancy.
Hello, sweetheart. Talk to me.
Hey, in the beginning, you talked about how Lama Zopa was just direct with his teaching and didn't have all the fluff that we need sometimes in the West. And it reminds me of how you teach.
Oh,
And
really?
yes, because you can be very direct.
Oh, no.
So sometimes that's not
I know,
for
but he's not rude though. I'm rude. He's not rude, I don't think. He's
well, but it's not for the faint of heart, but it is so beneficial. And if we can just hang in there with your teachings and with our teachers' teachings, and I guess that comes back to the I, because we can be so offended sometimes and kind of push back.
Yes, that's right.
But if we can relax into it, take it,
No, it's true.
then it helps us. So, but anyway, it just reminded me of like, oh, that's how Robina teaches.
Okay.
So
Well, he's my
that.
Lama, and Lama Yeshe is my Lama, and I'm their daughter. So, you know, some of them has to filter through me, which I'm happy about.
Yes, yes. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. That's very kind. Thank you. That's great. That's a good point, though, Nancy. Thank you. Anybody else, you sweethearts, people, something? Anybody else to say? Question?
Well, I'll ask a question, Venerable Robina, if no one else has one right now. Can you talk more about the Prison Liberation Project? Because I buy the calendar every year and I've looked at the website, but can you just talk more about the organization?
I don't know much about it. I gave it up in 2009, so I don't know. But I know it's basically carrying on the work that we started. We started in '94. We had a big team at some point. I think many of the things we did then, we got more funding. I think they're not happening now, but the principles are the same. It's run by this nun called Turkey. Mainly it's Australia and America, but there's branches in other countries that are run independently, like Lara Gatto in Italy has a wonderful project. But it's very different there. She mainly doesn't do books and stuff. She has different people going in teaching meditation to different prisons. I mean, Italy's more manageable, less people, smaller country, easier to handle, you know, and they've got a very interesting thing in Italy. The government allocates taxes to the religion of your choice. So there's this European, so then you're allowed, when you say you're a Buddhist, all the people who say Buddhist, there's a certain amount of taxes is allocated, and then this particular Buddhist organization that's a group of all the Buddhist groups, they get millions of euros, 30 million euros a year that they then delegate out to the different prison projects, to the different Buddhist groups. So like the Lama Zopa Institute got 200,000 euros to build a new dining room, and the prison project gets different money. It's amazing. In Italy, you know, it's extraordinary, isn't it? Nothing like that in America, I don't think, or Australia for that matter. So in Italy, they do different things. They have groups, they have many different Zen, they have Zen teachers. It's much more broad. It's not the same. But in America and Australia, which is how we did it in the beginning, the main service I could see was to give books, you know, to write to people and give books and take their phone calls. That was the main thing that happens. So people write, then they get their letters are scanned, and then they're given, if they keep writing, they're given to a mentor who could be anywhere in the world, and then they write to each other via the prison project email. You know, the prisoners write it by hand, but more and more the prisoners are getting emails now. So that's really what it is. It's supporting people with their practice, giving them lots of books. They're doing study programs. They take refuge. Rinpoche started giving us permission at the very beginning to give refuge and bodhisattva vows on the phone, you know. So these prisoners kneeling there in their orange jumpsuits at the public phone with their hands in their heart mudra, you know, the hands in their prayer mudra at their heart, kneeling on the ground at the public phones, taking refuge, or in the chaplain's office. It's so moving, you know. Very, very, very. And what we noticed was it's the personal contact. This is unbelievable, because most of these people have nothing and nobody, have no family, no money, no resources, nothing. So to have one human being on the planet you could write to and receive a book from, it's been the most precious gift. There's no question, you know. So that for me was not the moving part. And still, I've got about 20 or 30 guys on my list that I write to occasionally, but half a dozen maybe continue. Like there's a fellow on death row, my friend on death row, he's in Chasing Buddha, Mitchell. He's getting close to his death date, but you know, that hasn't happened yet. He's a very devoted practitioner. He writes little emails every now and again. Yeah, that's really what it is. But I mean, it's in different countries, different things. Italy's quite different. England, there's some activity. In Australia and America, it's the main thing, I think, the main activity. And it's mainly taking phone calls. Even that they maybe don't do anymore. I don't know. That's what we used to do. They don't have a newsletter anymore, I don't think. But the calendar, we started that in 1919. 1999, when I was editing Mandala. It was a calendar put together by Mandala. And then I stopped doing the job of Mandala. That's when I was in Taos in 2000. So the prison project took it on. And now they're carrying that calendar on, you know, since then. That's all I can say, Mary.
Thank you. Trish has a question.
Good. Talk to me, Trish.
Yes, thank you, Venerable Robina. I just bought the book.
Good.
And I just want to say that it really resonates with me in a way that other teachings don't, because I had a very full life and was very busy working and raising children. And then a few years ago, I was injured, and ever since then, I've been basically housebound. It's just too difficult for me to get around.
Prison. Basically, that's your prison, Trish.
Yeah.
You understand it very well.
I've been just very depressed because, you know, that my activities are so limited now, you know. So it's not just people in prison.
That's so brave of you. I can't believe it. And it really does. And you can see, because you're forced into this view now, aren't you? You don't have the luxury of not having it. You either go mad or you change your view, don't you? That's what my friends in prison have discovered. So it takes a courageous mind, Trish, to see it like this.
Well, I'm actually becoming more and more grateful for the opportunity to just, I mean, I can't do anything else.
That's it, darling. That's the point. That's the point. Your back's against the wall, isn't it? That's the point. And that's what Rinpoche means with all the ordinary people like yourself earlier, when you had no problems, you thought your life was lovely, you had lovely things, you were doing good things, but you feel like we're so free. But the moment something goes wrong, that's when we go crazy, isn't it? And we either go crazy or we change our mind. And that's what my friend Sonny did. Any of my friends on prison did. And that's what you're doing. This is really powerful, Trish. Really amazing. I really admire you. Such courage. Keep moving, girl. Don't give up, Trish. It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Did you want to say more? You're there? That's good. You want to say that? Nothing more? That's good.
Just thank you. I'm gonna keep listening to you. You really inspire me, and this book I think will really help me too. Thank you so much.
I'm so happy, sweetheart. Thank you so much for telling us that. Thank you. And that's the point for people. And this is the thing for Trish. or the friend's in prison. When you're not in prison, when she didn't have her accident, when we don't have things go wrong, when the husband hasn't left us, we're lulled into thinking, isn't life lovely? And it's not lovely, but we're lulled into thinking we've got happiness and freedom. But the second something goes wrong, that's the proof of where we're at. So don't wait to have a car accident. Don't wait till you're on death row. Don't wait till your husband leaves you before you start working on your mind. That's the wake-up call. That's the wake-up call. Start now. Start now. That's the point. That's the big learning. Thank you so much, Trish. That's very special. What else, darlings? Maybe when we finish now, I think it's enough. We're 10 minutes early, but it doesn't matter. We've covered masses already. And we'll have a break. And then how long is the break, Shankar?
Venerable Robina, the break is 1 hour. It's from 12 to 1 Mountain Time.
Okay, good. I'll see you in an hour then. Hour and 10 minutes, okay? You people? Jang Chob Sem Chog Rinpoche Ma Ke Panam Ke Guchi Ke Panyam Pa Me Pa Young Gong Ne Gong Du Paba Shoka. Maybe we never give up. Even the next hour, don't give up. See you in an hour. Hour and 10 minutes. Thank you, precious ones. Thank you, darlings. Okay, darlings. Let's go again for our last 2 hours. Seeing how to turn problems into something how to, as Rinpoche says, how to learn to like ice cream, to learn to like problems like we like ice cream. So let's discuss how we can do that. Let's discuss how that's logical. Let's discuss the logic for why we should want to do that. Let's look at the profound practice that is actually. Here we all are. Just thinking we're here for another 2 hours to complete this discussion so we can develop our amazing potential, put atomic bombs under our delusions and therefore our suffering, so we can be happier and happier and happier and be a benefit to others. That's the plan. So the logic, you've got to see the logic. I mean, when we hear this stuff, usually it's religion, it's punitive, you know, you've got to suffer, that kind of thing. Actually, when I was a Catholic, when I was a little girl, I was completely in love with God, but mainly I was in love with Our Lady, and I was in love with the saints. I was in love with Saint Therese of Lisieux, and when I was little. And I mean, I always, since I was a little girl, I wanted to be a priest, and they told me I couldn't be, I had to be a nun. So I thought, okay, I'll be a nun. And I just used to read all these books, these holy books. I mean, I was always the naughtiest girl, but I was holy inside, you know, had all these yearnings and aspirations. And then when I fell in love with Saint Therese when I was about 12, but I can never work it out. I try to look at the chronology of my life and it seems very confusing, but it seems to be that simultaneously that I wanted to be a nun like Saint Therese, I was also totally wicked. And when I was 15, for example, 14, I think, and I was at boarding school because I was so naughty, my mother sent me to boarding school. But somehow I had this sailor boyfriend. I don't understand the evolution of it. We went to Luna Park. I don't know if you have Luna Parks in America, these fun parks, you know. There's one in Australia, Melbourne's famous, Luna Park. And my sister Janet and I went, and we met these two sailors. I must have been 15. I was in boarding school, but I was at the same time, I was a saint. I was going to mass 7 mornings a week, so I can't work it out. But anyway, this boy, Eddie, his name was Eddie, and he had this little car, and he'd drive me back to school. We'd have weekends off, and he'd drive me back to boarding school at night on the Sunday. So I can't work it out, the evolution. It's very confusing. Anyway, what I'm talking about, I wanted to be a little nun like Saint Therese of Lisieux. And of course, I loved her because she became a nun when she was about 14, and she had visions of God, and she got all these sort of things, you know. She had like, I know I'm confusing her with the other Saint Therese, the more of the mystic one. But this one, she'd have suffering. She wanted to suffer for God. So I tried so hard to suffer for God. So I sort of thought you had to make problems. So at boarding school, we'd have I tried to just put one blanket on at night because I wanted to suffer for God. I tried to make problems. I didn't realize there were problems already coming by people being mean to me. I didn't think about that. I was so dramatic, but I didn't last long with one blanket. And then I'd kneel on by my bed to do my prayers. I had a hairbrush on my forehead, trying to suffer for God. You know, I tried so hard. I didn't try that hard. I was a bit weak. Anyway, so here, you don't have to suffer for anybody. It's just understanding the logic of attachment and aversion. Attachment is this junkie in us. This is the whole point. Attachment is a junkie, basically. Every millisecond, join the universe. It's the disease of all beings in the planet, in the universe, the disease of monkeys and dogs. It's Buddha's analysis of the mind, and it refers to all beings. It's not unique to the humans. It's very fascinating. So we've got all the virtues, and that's our saving grace. That's the humans. That's our saving grace as humans. If we're lucky enough, fortunate enough to be able to access our virtue, access our intelligence, access our ability to see things differently. That's the capacity of the human mind. That's the miracle of the human mind. But so what we're going to do is use those virtues to try and see things dependent arising, try to see things from a different point of view, so that we can rip out the delusions. And why do we want to rip out the delusions? Why do we want to stop attachment, stop anger, stop pride, stop jealousy, stop ego grasping, the root delusion? Because they cause us suffering. It's very simple. It's not punitive. But our problem is because we even conflate attachment and happiness. Total, utter mistake. Nothing wrong with happiness. Happiness is fantastic. The more pleasure, the better, dear, as Lama Yeshe would say. So, but the trouble is we think it's attachment, so we chuck the baby out with the bathwater. You know, it's completely mistaken because we haven't studied it properly, what Buddha means exactly. So the method we use now, being samsaric sentient beings, the method we use to get happy feelings is to get what attachment wants. It's the only method we know. Get the nice things, get the pleasant sound, pleasant taste, pleasant touch, nice boyfriend, nice handbag, nice this, nice food. That's the only method we know to trigger happy feelings. We don't know any other methods. But basically what Buddha's saying is it's like a method of a junkie to get happiness. You do get some satisfaction when you put the heroin in. But we know the long-term suffering is unbearable. It just increases your craving. It doesn't lessen your craving. It does bring a temporary moment of joy for a second, but it actually digs you deeper into your nightmare, you know, because you're utterly reliant upon it. And then when you don't get it, you have a panic attack. Well, that's exactly life. We're all junkies. It's not a joke. It's just a question of degree and a question of the object, that's all. So the method for Buddha is very radical. This is middle scope. This is high school, not even university yet. So we think happy feelings, pleasant feelings, which is what we all want, are the result of what we get when we get what attachment wants. That's our method. But Buddha says, no, he's found a method to get happy feelings that will last and not change into misery. He's very simple. He says his method for getting happy feelings that will be more profound, more stable, more lasting, and more natural. The method is to give up attachment. We think it's to get what attachment wants. He says, no, give up attachment. Give up being a junkie, basically. That's it. That's the Buddhist practice. That's the essence. So if we want to give up attachment, which is the main voice of ego grasping, the ignorance, the root delusion, and we eventually want to give up ignorance, and we want to give up the result of attachment, which is anger and aversion, and all the other dramas. The reason we want to give them up is because they cause us suffering, not because we're being punished. You're not allowed to be angry. You're not allowed to be attached. That's how we hear it. It's silly. It's causing us suffering. So the reason to give up delusions is because we're sick of suffering. So then we add this to this is the middle scope. Now we add this to the great scope, the compassion wing, where we want to also benefit others. And your compassion becomes paramount. This is the point for the great yogis. Compassion is paramount. Their empathy with the suffering of others is unbelievable. Levels that we can't even comprehend are possible. Not in our modern psychology, not in our neuroscience. This is Buddha's unique analysis. So basically, then in the first and second scopes, the second scope of practice, high school, the main job is for our benefit to get to calm the delusions down because we're sick of suffering. In the compassion wing, we're continuing that job. That never stops, but we're adding to that job the conscious enhancement of love and compassion and the virtues. So what begins to drive us most on the compassion wing is not only the wish to stop suffering, but also we find it so unbearable, all the suffering of others. Our compassion is so acute, so huge, you know. So we will do anything to continue to rip out the delusions, because then that will break down the barriers between self and other, because it's compassion that drives you. Not just to wish to be free from suffering, but compassion for others that drives us. So then naturally, if the presence in my mind of ego grasping and attachment and aversion and all the other dramas is the main cause of my suffering, and therefore is the main cause of why I have created, of the creation of barriers between self and other, therefore what limits my compassion, if they are the main cause, then obviously I will do anything to rid my mind of attachment and the delusions. And what's the quickest way? When the bad things happen, people, it's not rocket science. So that's why you want to then transform happiness into suffering into happiness, problems into happiness. You are glad at this level, you're so courageous and so brave, and you so want to get rid of the delusions. You're glad when you get smacked in the mouth. You are glad when that car nearly runs you over. You are glad when you don't get what you want. You are glad because why? Because it triggers the delusion, triggers aversion, triggers attachment, and you go, great. just put an atomic bomb under it. It's logical, completely logical, but you got to understand the logic behind the logic. There is a method to quickly get more compassion because you can't bear the suffering of others, because you want to get rid of the delusion so you can become a Buddha, so you can be of benefit to others. So what drives this level of practice is incredible compassion for others. You've got to see the logic of it, not just hear it as some punitive, you've got to suffer, you know. It's very clear when you understand the logic. And you can't, there's no shortcut, you've got to study it. It's a very specific approach that Buddha has, you know. So like I said before, don't wait. Like I'm talking about Trish, don't wait till you have an accident when you constantly have suffering. Don't wait till your husband leaves you. Don't wait till you're accused of murder and put on death row before you start this work. Start with putting up with a snore. I'm not joking. It's literally logical. You start small. That's powerful. And this is the tragedy in our lives, that we don't notice problems until it's too late. We don't notice the arising of attachment and anger and the fears and the dramas and the jealousy until it's too late. Like I say, always using the analogy, it's like you're driving on the freeway in your brand new car, and then your car gets older and older and older, but you're just so thinking it's so self-existent, my perfect car. You've never heard of car mechanics, you've never heard of maintenance, so that you never notice the wheels start wobbling very tiny. That's like the snore, until one day your husband wants, you know, he's so violent, and then you wonder, then, oh, I must be angry. But you never noticed all these years. The snores began to have the wheels start to wobble, the anger would rise slightly, and you never notice it until it's too late, until you're on the freeway at 120 k's an hour, and you're about to crash, but your wheels are falling off. Oh, my wheels are falling off. What do I do? Well, a bit late, I'm sorry. But if you're preparing by noticing the wheels wobbling, the anger towards the snore, anger upset when your daughter doesn't do what you want, anger when the shop doesn't do what you want, anger when the car in front, anger when the red light instead of green light, the baby types, the baby levels of anger, the baby levels of annoyance, irritation, frustration, which are mild levels of aversion, which is anger, and they are the response when attachment is thwarted, when attachment doesn't get what it wants 1,000 times a day. It's at that subtler level we start to pay attention. Then you'll be ready for the dramas, then you'll be ready for the at 120 kilometers an hour when the wheels are about to fall off. In fact, they won't fall off because you will have maintained them. That's the point. So we've got to start noticing the mind as soon as we can. That's the actual job of being a Buddhist. That's the actual job of being a Buddhist. Start the serious work of being your own therapist. So the method is that to catch the mind. So what happens is, normally you catch the snore. You notice the snore, the irritating thing, the thing that you believe is the cause of why you're irritated. You believe the thing that is the cause of why you're angry. That's the analysis we use in the West. The thing happens, aversion arises, and you blame the thing. So then we try to change the thing. We tell the husband to stop snoring. It's okay, but better to work on your mind, more radical. Much more powerful. And that's the simple point the Buddha's making. You can change something, change it. Okay, change him to stop him snoring, that's fine. But what if you can't? And that's often what happens. You can manipulate certain things. You can change some things. But as Sonny in prison said, I finally realized I could not change anything. But they couldn't take my mind from me. So don't wait till it's too late. Start practicing now. And the biggest thing is it's like reversing the energy of a bomb. To distinguish between the thing that happens out there and your response in the mind. Our business is the response in our mind. Technically and scientifically, it's very simple, but emotionally, it's almost impossible because it all happens so quickly. And we're used to the victim mentality, which blames the outside. It's the function of all the delusions is that they're like, dualistic. Lama Zopa would say schizophrenic. Don't be insulted. Our responses are so automatic. We don't even notice the responses. As Lama Zopa said before, we don't even notice that our mind plays any role at all. This is pretty shocking. But we start to notice the moment of attachment, the moment of aversion, the moment of upset, the moment of anger, the moment of irritation, the moment of jealousy. That is the thing we work on. That's what's hard. And how you're going to work on that is when you start to unpack and unravel it, you notice the feeling first, which is the very gross level, but you've got to get underneath it, get to the conceptual story that informs that feeling. That's the clarity of the analysis we need to cultivate, So you literally change your interpretation. That's what you're doing. This is daily work. Like I said, don't wait till you go on death row to do this. Don't wait till you get sick, have a car accident and live in pain to do this. We do it every day. We be prepared, you know. That's how you can transform a problem into happiness. That's how we can learn to like a problem like we like ice cream. And why we can do this is what we get more familiar with now, as Rinpoche is implying in the whole book, is because nothing has an intrinsic nature. This is where emptiness utterly comes in. If things, in other words, if things were intrinsically good or bad, if things were intrinsically fat or thin, if things were intrinsically nice or not, if things were intrinsically anything, then you couldn't change your mind. You'd be stuck with it. But the fact is, nothing has an intrinsic nature. Nothing has an intrinsic nature. And you've got to know the meaning of that and the experiential implication of that. Then we can really understand how you can see a problem as good. And again, the question is, why should you do that? What is the benefit to Sunny? Sunny had two choices. I mean, we don't think we have a choice. But like I remember reading at the same time as I first read about Sunny. I know her now. She's out of prison. I remember reading her about years ago. I read about a fellow, also innocent, also on death row, accused of raping and murdering somebody, totally innocent. And his response was what we would say is normal. He went completely out of his brain, you know, completely went insane. The nightmare, the suffering was unbearable, which is normal. So the difference between them is that he didn't have the ability, like most of us, to recognize that he could change his attitude towards it. This is why it's so advanced. Sunny, for whatever astonishing reason from past practice, no doubt, she could see. As she said, I knew I had a choice. Most people don't, and that's the tragedy of the suffering of humans. So this fellow went completely insane, screaming daily, as long as he had a voice. I did not rape and kill that woman. The despair was just unbearable. So, you know, that's the one option, which is what we don't think it's an option. We just think that's natural. But she had the miracle of the ability to be able to have clarity, has to be from past practice, and has to be also from not much anger. Very powerful. But she was able to navigate her experience, her hellhole of nightmare of prison, 12 years on death row, and then 5 more years before she finally was released. 17 years imprisoned, husband executed, lost her children, family was killed, completely innocent. Didn't have a view of karma. She doesn't think much about karma. But this incredible emotional intelligence, I think I call it, you know, this ability to see. I knew I had a choice, she said, in this nightmare. That other guy didn't know it. That's the miracle. So don't take it for granted. It's incredibly difficult. It's unbelievably advanced practice. It's astonishing. So the simple point is this. If we had the choice between being out of our brain with rage and despair, or had the choice to be relatively sane and reasonable and in charge of what we're doing, therefore more happy, I mean, it would seem reasonable you'd choose the second option, isn't it? Because that's the consequence. She was more happy. She became more happy. But when we think of stop being angry, when we think of changing our attitude, we think you become passive. No, the irony is he was locked in his despair and misery, not knowing he could change his mind. And he couldn't change the outside. That was the nightmare. He then couldn't do anything. He was paralyzed. He could never think of anything reasonable. He couldn't use his intelligence. He could never get himself out of prison. He couldn't try and do his defense. He just went mad. And we in our culture think that's natural and normal, and we wouldn't even think that there are options for him. Whereas she had this astonishing ability to work on her mind, to not go completely berserk. Therefore, she didn't lose her common sense. Therefore, she didn't stop working on her freedom. She didn't just give up and sit there thinking like she's some angel in a cave meditating. She never stopped working on her freedom, and she got it eventually. So the simple point the Buddha is making without any drama is if you do the analysis of your own, you do an analysis, like you do some market research of your own mind, check, you know, just do the research in one day when you're very angry, very jealous, very depressed, very fearful. It's so obvious, it's almost embarrassing. Check how you feel. Well, it's unbearable, isn't it? The pain is unbearable. But our trouble is we know it's unbearable. We think she caused it. We think he caused it. So then we think I'm allowed to be angry. I'm allowed to be depressed. I'm allowed to suffer. This shows how intensely insane we are, that we're so disconnected from our own feelings, so disconnected from what's possible, that we're just sitting in this utter despairing victim mode, thinking we're allowed to be this way because look how evil he is. Whereas she could see it was evil, it was outrageous, it was a nightmare, she was innocent, her husband had been killed, his brains did burst into flames, it was a nightmare, it was like hell, but she was able to change her way of seeing it, and thus became clear and content, and did her yoga every day, and was helpful to other people, and eventually got out of prison. And now I tell you, I've met many people who've been in prison over the years. I've met many people who spent years wrongly accused. It's very common. The nightmare of it, the number of, and I meet people and you can tell immediately, you know, because you become emotionally stunted in prison because it's such an outrageous place. But she, when you meet her, she's like this, what the world would call a little old lady, very content, in a little wheelchair, with a little hubby, growing her veggies in Ireland. You'd never know the nightmare she'd been through because, you know, and this is what we call in our culture, we call it PTSD. What that is your inability at the time of the suffering to handle it, to bear it, to cope with it, to interpret it. So what do? You suffocate it, or you go mad like that other guy. She didn't have that because she didn't suppress. She worked with what was arising as it arose. So then you don't have mental breakdowns. You don't get PTSD because you've dealt with it when it happened. Most of us aren't capable of dealing with the pain when it happens because we don't know what to do with it. So we suffocate it or we kill somebody. But she's not like that. For me, it's a profound, interesting point. She's like a regular, funny, happy, wonderful lady, you know. And the nightmare she went through, you can't believe, because she dealt with it. She worked on her mind. She changed her mind. She transformed problems into happiness. This is not religion. It's not punitive. It's not punishment. It's not reward. It's practical common sense. And Carmen, we understand it. Again, Buddha's not a creator. He doesn't own this stuff. He didn't make up this. He's observed it. It demands intelligence, in other words, emotional intelligence. It demands authenticity. It demands courage. It demands ownership. It demands accountability. It's huge. Emotionally, psychologically, it's quite advanced. But we're all capable, you know. And why should we do this? Because it makes us more happy. And then add compassion to the mix. You want to do it because you want to rip out these artificially created barriers that delusions have created between self and other. That's the level we're discussing it here. That's the level Rinpoche is talking about it, you know, to the prisoners. Every day, that's it, every day. Just work on your mind every day. Take the baby things, the tiny little events, and notice your response to them, and then change your response. That's it. Of course, it's difficult. I mean, it's easy to say the words. It's like giving the technique of how to do a backhand like Federer. It's easy to say it. You've got to work hard to get it done, don't you? It's possible. So ask me some questions, you people. Come on. I've had almost no questions. We need some more questions, please. And before as well, whatever you have, whatever you've got.
Please just unmute yourself. If you have a question, just go for it, please.
Anything at all. Anything at all. Anything at all.
Venerable Robina?
Yes.
I noticed that it's the little things that get me more than the big things. Like, you know, something goes, you can't get on something on your computer and you're like, ah. But when a big thing hits, it makes me think, okay, I have to work with my mind. But all the little things, the little aggravation, I don't always go there.
That's right. That's the point. That's the point. That's the point. That's like, because Nancy, because we're so, the junkie in us, driving the new car, seeing the car as self-existently beautiful and perfect, never noticing that, never thinking anything could ever go wrong. That's how we are when life goes nicely. So then you don't even notice the wobbles. So you don't even notice the little wobbles, which is when annoying things happen. It's only when the dramatic wobble happens that you go, oh my God, I better start doing something here. I better get into action. So that's why the little baby things are the opportunity, Nancy. This is the miracle. This is the point. So the moment you get slightly annoyed, we think it just doesn't matter, you know, but it's called anger. It's called annoyance. It's called response when your attachment didn't get what it wants, because your attachment is a junkie that only wants the nice experiences. And there's 1,000 of those a day. This is when we have to start practicing. This is a miracle. When we can be, then we'll be really ready. We're training our minds. It's exactly the point, Nancy. Exactly. Perfect point. So keep doing it, babe. Then you get stronger and stronger. And then before you know it, you won't even start getting annoyed or upset. You drop the cup and you'll laugh. The computer won't work and you won't even respond. You'll just accept it. So because attachment is a junkie to only have the nice. And then the unnice happens, you get annoyed, upset, frustrated, how dare, and we just think it's nothing. You wouldn't go to your therapist. I got annoyed today with my computer. They'd laugh at you. They only want to deal with disasters on the freeway. But we have to learn to do the baby things and adjust the wheels and catch it there. And then before you know it, you're as steady as a rock. And when the computer goes wrong, nobody would even know it because you're going to be just accepting what's happening and then you're able to deal with it. That was the difference between this poor woman, Sunny, and the crazy guy. When the bad things happened, it became so bad he could do nothing. She was able, because she changed her mind, to deal with it. So start with the baby things, Nancy. Every moment is a moment of aversion. So every moment you're training your mind and getting angry. Every moment you work on it, you're radically purifying your mind. It's powerful, but it seems so small, but it's powerful. Isn't it? Such a true point, Nancy. And then by the end of the day, you'll be relaxed. That's the whole point. That's why Sunny came out of prison not like completely mentally tortured, because she dealt with the dramas as they happened. So you will find you'll be quite relaxed by the end of the day if you don't buy into the annoyed, upset, frustrated, how dare, or you see the television and moan about the politicians. It just seems like normal conversation, but it's called anger. It's called anger every time, but it's a mild version. It's a miracle, actually, if you can do it. You try it. Experiment. It's amazing. Thank you. Yes, perfect point, Nancy. Every one of us. So why don't wait for the accident to happen. Don't wait to be accused of murder. That's the point. And you'll be ready. Then you'll be ready for it. Then you'll laugh. Perfect, Nancy. Who else, people? Anything else? More questions? More discussion? So how are you going with your problems, Anna? You handling them? All the shitty stuff coming at you, you're working on it, you're being better and more skillful?
Hi there. Yes, I've got quite a few issues and ongoing things occurring in my life, just to explain to everyone. But yeah, I seem to be applying the Dharma more quickly, noticing, the snores, the small irritations, which of course it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. And then you dig deeper, you do get to this narrative you've been telling yourself for years, and then behind that there's another narrative, and it's just a never ending, wondrous process. It is mind-blowing, it really is.
You're getting braver and braver in the face of all the dramas, are you? You're getting steadier and steadier, Anna. I think you are, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I have my angry days, sad mornings. Sometimes it can be 5 minutes of beginning the Tara practice and my mind has done a 180.
That's right.
From its day and night. And I can try and take an outside perspective and be the watcher of myself, and it can be quite amusing at times. But for the seriousness and the dramaticness of what it is, in its nature, it's utterly ridiculous. And then you get onto the emptiness side and the illusions of a delusion.
So you just have to keep and remembering
it's tough.
And also remembering the karma one. So there's two parts, aren't there? There's knowing all these things that are coming into you. There's a karmic appearance, the result of your own rubbish coming in the form of these horrible solicitors and mean ex-husbands and whatever it might be, your own vomit coming back. And the other one is the way you navigate your mind in dealing with it. So knowing it's past karma is one thing, owning it as yours, owning it as oh my God, here comes another obstacle. Oh my God, here comes another load of rubbish that I created already. That's powerful. And then dealing in your mind about how you see it. This is what practice is, Anna. And you're doing very well. You're doing brilliant.
Thank you.
And you're getting happier and happier, aren't you? More stable, aren't you?
Yes, definitely.
Exactly, Anna. Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you, darling. What else, people? Anything else? Anything at all? About anything? No? Come on, you people. Ask me something. So maybe I'll read you some Rinpoche then, more from Rinpoche. I'll bless you now with his talk about compassion. Let's read about compassion, okay? Which book is it? Prisoners. Here we go. Here we go. All right. So let's look at the chapter called Without compassion, life is meaningless. This is intense hearing about this, because when you're in prison and you think, you're having a nightmarish life, and it really is nightmarish, to suddenly hear about how you've got to have compassion for other people when you're suffering yourself, it's very hard, isn't it? I mean, it's very hard to hear that. So you've got to be very brave to hear this, when you're suffering yourself. It's overwhelming. 63, where is it? Okay. All right, chapter 10, without compassion, life is meaningless. So many sentient beings suffer for us. This is a type of analysis we would never do, but think about it, So when we realize that being caught up in samsara is the most frightening thing, we won't be able to stand it for even a second. But not only that, so many sentient beings have to suffer for us, for our comfort, for our survival. So many sentient beings suffer so that we can enjoy shelter. So many sentient beings are killed so that we can have clothes. So many sentient beings have to die so that we can eat and drink. Just think of the chickens. Millions and millions of chickens are killed in the world every day just for food. And so many sentient beings have to create negative karma by killing the chickens and all the other beings for our food and our clothes. So, I mean, and this is so many beings get crushed and die when we drive a car. I remember one time in one of these conversations with somebody, it actually was in Liverpool, Anna. I was in a cheese shop in Liverpool. Maybe you've heard me tell me this story because Anna's from Liverpool. So I was in this cheese shop and I took a picture of me with buying this cheese called Kick-Ass Cheddar. Kick-Ass Cheddar, you Americans. And then I put it on Facebook, and this fellow was insulted, how dare a Buddhist nun eat cheese, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't want to be fundamentalist or political, so I put on a story. I'd always wondered how many bugs get killed on the road, when we drive. And so, of course, you Google it, some fellow's done the research, and one Dutch fellow, I forget what it is, but just per number plate, per kilometre or whatever, it's like millions, trillions of little baby creatures that get slaughtered. Well, they're sentient beings too. But we're so obsessed with eating, I think, in our culture, that we only think about if we eat them. If you killed all those bugs and then ate them, then you'll be wicked. But just killing them, and he said, oh, that you can't help that, he said. So it's a bit ridiculous, So and that's just not even, so even the billions of beings who die, like Lama Zopa says, and that's not even eating, that's just by existing, by driving. Billions of beings die, get harmed. So therefore, so many beings suffer many hardships for us. So the thing is, we'd say, well, what do you mean for us? They didn't do it for us. They didn't, but it happened. And as a result, we get a plate of rice. We get a plate of chickens, That's a fact. That's facts. So therefore, you must listen, reflect, meditate on, and practice the path that has been revealed by the wise, compassionate, kind, omniscient one, Guru Shakyamuni Buddha. Only by doing this can you be liberated from this samsaric prison, so that other sentient beings don't have to suffer for you, don't have to create negative karma for you, don't have to harm others for you. And not only that, you also have the responsibility to liberate other sentient beings as well. The purpose of life, therefore, is to be most beneficial for sentient beings. Not being in prison isn't the purpose of your life. You are in prison to develop compassion for other sentient beings. Without compassion, life is meaningless. Even if a person lived for many eons, if they have no compassion, if they do not help other sentient beings, their life will be empty and meaningless. If one has a lot of power but no compassion, the power is dangerous for oneself and for others. Without compassion, power is used by the ego, by self-cherishing. It doesn't matter how much education we have, if there is no good heart, no compassion, no thought to benefit others, life is empty and meaningless. All the education is used just to develop selfish ego and delusions. There is no meaning in having an education without a good heart, the thought of benefiting others. Even if a person who is not in prison is able to travel the whole world, going wherever they want, doing whatever they want, if they don't have a good heart, the thought to benefit others, their life has no meaning. It doesn't matter how much wealth a person has. Life is empty if there is no compassion. Without compassion, there are only personality clashes because of anger, jealousy, and the like. Without compassion, we are overwhelmed by problems, like a mouse who's caught in a trap and dies, an elephant who's stuck in the mud and suffocates, a fly who's caught in a spider's web and is eaten alive, or a moth who's attracted by a candle flame and drowns in the hot wax. Without compassion in your heart, your life is enmeshed in problems that continue until you die. Without compassion, all you have is ego, which harms numberless sentient beings, both directly and indirectly, including those in the whole world, in your country, your own parents, your partner, your children, and yourself. But with compassion, you will become the source of peace and happiness, both temporary and ultimate, for numberless sentient beings, including those in the whole world, in your country, your own parents, your partner, your children, and lastly, yourself. As His Holiness said, when I first heard about compassion like this, it's too much on my mind. I couldn't cope, Then I heard His Holiness say, if you want to help others, practice compassion. If you want to help yourself, practice compassion. Now, experience problems with compassion. As we discussed in chapter 7, you can use the situation of being in prison, even being executed, as a means to develop compassion by exchanging yourself for others, taking upon yourself sentient being suffering and the causes of suffering, and giving your own merits and happiness to them. See the meditation on giving and taking in chapter 18. That's that kind of famous practice in Tibetan called Tonglen, where you literally make this paradigm shift where you would rather have the pain, you'd rather give away your happiness. You can decide to experience prison on behalf of all the sentient beings who are in prison now and who have the karma to be in prison in the future. Think, I am experiencing prison on behalf of all sentient beings so that they don't have to experience it. Let them have the happiness of enlightenment and all the happiness up to enlightenment. I'm experiencing prison for all numberless other sentient beings. From time to time, every day, think like that. So, of course, the point about this is you don't stop other people suffering by thinking this. It's this brave attitude that if you could, you would rather have it and you would rather they be free of suffering. That's what you're doing. It's actually, you're the beneficiary of this. It's amazing, powerful practice to make you brave enough to then want to have the courage to want to be a benefit to others. You'd rather have the suffering than them. You're not going to take away their suffering. It's not the method. It's not the purpose. It's to help you become courageous. If you have cancer or AIDS, for example, you can experience your illness with compassion for the sake of other sentient beings, to bring them all happiness up to and including enlightenment. Thus, your sickness becomes part of your path to enlightenment. Or if you have a bad reputation, you can experience it for sentient beings. I mean, just look at Sunny and her husband, totally innocent. They became this vilified monsters, in prison for years, seen as monsters. In this way, all your problems, being in prison, failed relationships, illnesses, business failure, unemployment, a bad reputation, become a special heroic practice. Before, such experiences were something that you disliked and only wanted to get rid of. So now with your practice of compassion, they become highly desirable, special, powerful, even necessary for the development of your mind in the path. Wanting happiness for others brings happiness for yourself. Developing your life to achieve happiness for others is also the best way to achieve your own happiness. The more you practice compassion, the greater the peace and happiness in your heart. When you sincerely practice kindness to others, even if you don't expect it, naturally, the result is that they are kind to you, are happy with you, listen to you. You become like the rising sun, illuminating all. In this way, you achieve happiness now, every day, every hour, every minute. By continuing to live your life like this, you go from happiness to happiness, and at the end of your life, you will have no regrets, not the slightest fear of dying, only incredible enjoyment, happiness. In Rinpoche's book about death, there's a chapter on this. He says, just even a person who's just lives their life in kindness, their mind is relaxed. And death will be a happy, joyful experience, because when the mind is virtuous and kind, your mind is looking out, your mind is spacious, your mind is not self-centered, so you won't be any fear, you know. Compassion can heal illness. In recent times in Seattle, it was probably 20 years ago, one student had cancer that had spread throughout her body. The doctors were afraid to operate. They felt that it was too risky. So she did the practice of exchanging self for others, as I mentioned above, as Tonglen, chapter 18. When she eventually went to the hospital for a checkup, they did not find any cancer. The doctors were completely amazed. She explained what she had practiced, but they could not understand how this meditation could cure her cancer totally. This is one subject they cannot explain. Compassion is the main cause of bodhicitta. When someone achieves bodhicitta, they become a bodhisattva. In that second, they become the spiritual heir of all the Buddhas. They receive the name. So that means when you've really made that paradigm shift and now only others arise in your mind, there's one of the criteria of the accomplishment of bodhicitta, the criterion is that there's no longer the thought of I. It sounds very bizarre to us. That neurotic I, you know, the needing I, it's gone. You're only thinking of others. Bodhicitta is the culmination of compassion. It's not equivalent. In that sense, so much merit, unbelievable merit, meaning lots of virtuous karmic seed in your mind, is needed to accomplish bodhicitta, the root of which is compassion. This compassion fuels the skies of benefit that derive from bodhicitta, like rocket fuel powers a spaceship, or electricity generated by a power station lights up an entire city. It is compassion that has already brought numberless sentient beings to enlightenment in the past, is bringing numberless sentient beings to enlightenment at present, and will bring numberless sentient beings to enlightenment in the future. It is compassion that makes numberless Buddhas do perfect, unmistaken work for numberless sentient beings until they achieve enlightenment. And it is compassion that causes all Buddhas to have omniscient mind and the perfect power to benefit all sentient beings. Bodhisattvas are the supreme object of offerings of all sentient beings. We collect inconceivable merits when we make offerings to them. We collect so much merit just by seeing them or hearing their voice, or even when they give us something or touch us. Even if we harm a bodhisattva, because of their realizations, they only benefit us in return. They pray for good things to happen to us. There's a saying in relation to bodhisattvas: if you can't make a connection with them by doing good things, then make a connection by doing harm. This is not saying you must harm a bodhisattva, but if it does happen, it is worthwhile. In return, you are guided by that bodhisattva from life to life. They only benefit you, only pray for you. For example, when the Buddha was a bodhisattva, he sacrificed his blood for 5 yakshas. They drank his blood, certain kind of being, you know. In return, the bodhisattva prayed that in a future life, they would be his direct disciples, receive teachings from him, and of course, that they would go forth to liberation and enlightenment. So due to that karmic connection, in the next life, they became his disciples as human beings and received their first Dharma teachings from him at Deer Park in Sarnath on the Four Noble Truths, the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. The benefits of bodhicitta are unbelievable. With bodhicitta, you can completely dry up the oceans of samsaric suffering and its causes and achieve liberation and enlightenment, because it helps you gain the wisdom directly realizing emptiness, which eradicates both gross and subtle defilements. So there's the 2 wings of the bird, okay? The wisdom wing is the nuts and bolts of the initial work you do to abide by the laws of karma and work on your mind and lessen delusions and get renunciation. And then you complete that wisdom wing by realizing emptiness. That's what gets you out of samsara. And then bodhicitta is, this adds this immense, powerful, unbelievable power of this bodhicitta and compassion, etc. And the 2 wings of this is the completion of these 2 is Buddha. So wisdom is not enough. You get out of samsara, but you don't have much compassion. You have pretty good compassion, but not so powerful. And bodhicitta is not enough. And until a certain point, you can even lose bodhicitta. So a bird needs 2 wings. Bodhicitta is what allows Arya bodhisattvas, and Arya, superior bodhisattva, is a person who's realized emptiness, to abandon the sufferings of samsara, including rebirth, old age, sickness, and death, by achieving the right seeing path, the third of the 5 I mentioned before. Even if you have gained the wisdom directly perceiving emptiness, the highest you can achieve without bodhicitta is liberation from suffering and its causes, nirvana. These arhats have many inconceivable qualities, but they still have the remainder of the suffering aggregates. They haven't fully achieved the path. Bodhisattvas abandon the thought of achieving their own liberation from the ocean of samsaric sufferings and its causes, delusions, and karma, as one discards used toilet paper, having not an atom of interest in it. They have only aversion to gaining the happiness of nirvana for themselves alone. You've got to have that. That's the wisdom wing. You've got to have that. You've got to want to be revolted by suffering, your own, and get out of it. But once you add bodhicitta, that's what takes over everything. The compassion overrides everything. Bodhicitta is the door to the Mahayana path to enlightenment and the root of the limitless qualities of Buddha's holy body, speech, and mind. Bodhicitta allows bodhisattvas to complete the accumulation of the 2 types of merit, transcendental wisdom and virtue. It's the 2 wings, and is the cause of their achieving the 2 holy bodies, Rupakaya and Dharmakaya, which is again the 2 wings, another way of just putting the 2 wings, which is the ultimate goal. The sole purpose of achieving these 2 holy bodies, the Rupakaya and the Dharmakaya, the fully developed body, which is a result of compassion and bodhicitta, and the fully developed mind, the Dharmakaya, which is the result of wisdom. The sole purpose of achieving these 2 is to be able to do perfect work for all sentient beings. Even though there are numberless sentient beings, and it can take a bodhisattva 3 countless great eons to complete the accumulations that enable them to bring every single one to enlightenment, what gives them the determination to do so is bodhicitta. No matter how many eons it takes to get even one sentient being to generate a single virtuous thought, the bodhisattvas will try to make it happen without being discouraged. In the ornament for the Mahayana Sutras, Maitreya, the future Buddha, said, in order to ripen even one virtuous thought in the mind of a sentient being, the bodhisattva, the victorious one's heir, whose mind is stabilized in supreme perseverance for highly ripening sentient beings, does not get discouraged, even if it takes thousands of 10 million eons. The courageous bodhisattvas are able to bear all the hardships of working for sentient beings, no matter how great they are, even if it costs them their life. Since bodhisattvas see how beneficial it is to bear hardship in order to work for others, they are not only able to bear it, but they experience limitless joy as well. For bodhisattvas, even dying as a result of working for others is like drinking nectar, or like the delight of a swan when plunging into a cool pond on a hot day. Your life belongs to others. When you ask what the best practice is for you, all this is, I think, to this 45-page man. He got the entire Lam Rim in his 45-page letter. What all the numberless Buddhas found when they checked for sentient beings, what was that bodhicitta is the best practice. My answer to your question is the same. I cannot answer differently from what all the Buddhas have said in the past when they checked what was most beneficial. The practice and realization of bodhicitta is the most important thing in life because it fulfills not only your own wishes for happiness, but also those, All right. You achieve all, with bodhicitta, you achieve all the happiness of this life, the happiness of all the coming future lives, the ultimate happiness of liberation from samsara, and finally you attain full enlightenment. Then there is no limit to your ability to benefit all sentient beings. Think of all the human beings in just one country, the many millions. You are able to cause happiness up to enlightenment for every one of them. You are able to cause all this happiness for all the human beings in this world and all the human beings in other universes. For numberless human beings, you are able to cause all this happiness. Imagine all the various types of animals and insects there are. The ants, for example, as I mentioned before, in one spot, under one stone, in one ant's nest, there are so many ants, countless thousands of ants, that in one field or on one mountain, in one country, in all the countries of this world, we can't imagine how many there are. You are able to cause all happiness up to enlightenment for them. Imagine all the numberless sentient beings you can see only through a microscope. Your bodhicitta is able to cause all happiness up to enlightenment for all these sentient beings. From you, from your bodhicitta, the numberless hell beings, hungry ghosts, animals, humans, gods and demigods can receive all levels of happiness up to enlightenment. Isn't that incredible? You can't imagine what your bodhicitta can do. What else is there to enjoy in life? It doesn't matter whether you are in prison or at home. Wherever you are, by practicing bodhicitta, you have the best life, the happiest life, the most meaningful life. It doesn't matter where you are. Your mind can practice this. Getting out of prison is not the purpose of your life. Remember, getting out of prison is not the purpose of your life. Being rich is not the purpose of life. Being healthy is not the purpose of life. Having a long life is not the purpose of life. These things are not the meaning of life. The purpose of life is to be beneficial for others, useful for sentient beings. If you are able to make your life beneficial for sentient beings, to bring them happiness, then your purpose in life will be achieved. Our life belongs to sentient beings. Therefore, I advise you to live your life with a bodhicitta motivation so that everything you do, as much as possible, is to free sentient beings from the oceans of samsaric sufferings and for them to achieve enlightenment. To accomplish this, you need to achieve full enlightenment. Therefore, do everything: study, practice, meditate, eat, walk, sleep, sit, with this motivation. When you hear me talking from my own side, you hear I don't talk much like this, because I can't talk like this. I don't understand it. When I read Rinpoche, then I can hear it. Because he lives this, he's personification of this. You can see it. You can't make all that up. You can't pretend those words. You can't talk that not from the heart. It's not a possibility, So for me, I have to read him to feel the feelings. I can't say them. I can talk about the mind. I get the mind. I get delusions. I can talk about them. I understand the shit of being in delusions. That I can talk about. This is Rinpoche. It's too much. But it shows me it's possible. It gives me courage to not give up, to be like him. Okay, what else is there? I can read here. Better his words than mine. Excuse me, you just get my sniffs, I'm sorry. I've got a whole hour to go. Any questions, please? You people, you've got to have some conversation with me. Come on, I'm running out of voice. Talk to me.
I have a question for you, Venerable.
Good. Now ask me.
I wanted to, if you could expand upon how to incorporate putting bodhicitta into your everyday life.
Right, okay. So you didn't get anything from what Rinpoche just said?
No, I did. I did.
No clue there.
Can you repeat it for me? No, I'm kidding.
Okay, let me tell you. Let me sort of try and put them down to earth words then. Okay. Okay, it's a hard one. I think, for me, frankly, emptiness is easier. I think the understanding of squeezing your brain and getting understanding, dependent arising, and it's kind of exciting. But this is too much for the human mind. This is kind of shocking talk for me. The Bodhisattva one is so outrageous, so outrageous. It's so shocking because it attacks every fiber of our being. Because when we're upset and angry, what is arising is only the sense of I that is not getting what it wants. It sounds so brutal, but the more we understand that, it's like embarrassing how shockingly self-centered we are. But our trouble when we hear that in the West, we hear that as being abusive. If your therapist began telling you that you'd be self-centered, that's why you study, you'd sue her, because we can't hear that. So when you hear about a bodhisattva who's able to be happy for others and take on the suffering and be joyful when bad things happen, it's like demented, you can't hear it. So, this is more heavy. This is far more heavy, I can tell you. So what to say? So how to put it into practice? Well, there's one is the really most powerful one that is just, okay, when we think that practice is training, practice means training. When you go practice tennis, you've got to have the right instructions and then you have to practice it, isn't it? So here, this is Federer talking, basically. Think what I'm saying, Alexis. This is Federer. Get my point. This is Federer telling us about real tennis. This is Lama Zopa, who is what he says. He is fully accomplished. So he's expressing exactly from his heart how to play tennis. So that we have to hear Federer. We don't want to hear less. We don't want Federer to say, oh, no, it's impossible. You can't do it. We want him to tell us how to do it. So then you're asking, how do I practice that in daily life? Well, you've got to take the words that Theta has said and then try to do it. I mean, really, there's nothing less or more than that, but not expect that it will be real backhand. It'll be pretend backhand. So then you think, so basically it's a bunch of thoughts. This is a bunch of thoughts. So if you want to, you know, put this into daily life, maybe in your morning practice, you open a book and you, let's say, take Lama Zopa and you read a paragraph and he says, think this. Well, you do exactly what he says. You think it. And then when a bad problem happens, when a problem in the car happens, you know, someone in the car's jumping in front of you, and the first instinct of ego is to play a bad backhand, is to sort of shout at him, then you remember Rinpoche's words. Okay, he wants to be happy just like me. Then I'm so happy for you. Please enjoy. That's how you practice.
Okay.
You don't expect to feel better. You see, our trouble with practice, we think we're very addicted, I think, in our world to think that meditation is like you've got to get a special experience. I'm going to go on the court, I'm going to practice backhands. And what we think that means is I'm going to play a really good backhand and get very excited. No, you've got to hit 1,000 balls and maybe not play one good backhand, but you know the process is that eventually you will be able to play a backhand. So you've got to have you've got to be prepared to do the tough work. So having a virtuous thought like bodhicitta, don't think you're going to feel it. Forget that. Don't wait for that to come. You'll give up in a minute. Maybe you're full of rage and you hate everybody, but just by having the thought, may I one day be able to exchange my problems for others, then you sow the seed in the mind. You with me? Are you with me, Alex?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Don't expect the result. That's our biggest problem. We expect a result. We will say, oh, I had such a lovely meditation today. Oh, good. What happened? I felt tears of compassion for sentient beings. Well, I'm very happy for you, but it's not stable. You might have played a good backhand, but you haven't perfected it yet. You haven't sustained it yet. You've got to keep practicing. Don't get overexcited. You've got to practice it until eventually it is spontaneous. That's what it means here. Spontaneous compassion, spontaneous bodhicitta, spontaneous realizations, but you train yourself in thinking it and attempting to do it every day. That's what practice is, with no expectation of any good result. You just keep doing it until you've programmed your mind perfectly. You with me, Alexis?
Thank you.
Yeah. Makes sense, doesn't it? Don't expect
does,
experiences. Don't expect experiences. We think it's all about experiences. You might have a good experience one day, but don't that's not the beginning and the end of everything. It's nice to have that. It gives you a bonus. Oh wow, I can do it after all. But then you got to do it to the point where you can do it every second. That's when you finally do a bodhicitta. You've made this actual shift in your mind where it is now spontaneous that others come first. You don't have to force it. And like everything, we all know you keep doing something often enough and you'll get better at it. But we don't trust that with thoughts. You get my point?
Yes.
We don't trust it. But the Tibetans, so we say practice makes perfect. But Tibetans have a wonderful way of putting it. They say nothing gets more difficult with practice. It's much more humble, I think. So have confidence. Have confidence in the process. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. I have a funny story. You know how you've talked about how all our thoughts in our head are like roommates.
That's right, exactly.
A couple mornings ago, I was going down the stairs and I was listening to myself and I'm like, I'm coming.
There you go. Well done. No, it's interesting, isn't it? I know, Alexis, it's so true. We've got to really learn to, that's right. Yeah. Wonderful. I like that. Okay, what else, people? Any questions? It's 2:00. We've got a whole hour. Come on. Questions, people. Any questions?
I have a question.
Who is I? Which I is this? Masha.
Masha.
Okay, good, darling. Talk to me. How are you? How are you going?
I'm fine, thank you.
Where are you these days?
In Amsterdam.
Good. You doing well?
Yes, I'm doing well.
Got a job?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah. Yes. So I'm working in a group and there's a guy and we are kind of opposite characters. And he gets very nervous of my way of working. So my question is, I think it's good to just do the way I do things, but the question is it more compassionate to slow down a little bit and give him the space that he needs. Because
Well, I don't know, Masha. You have to first tell me, though, who has what power to make what decisions. Are you this some kind of democratic group where you all have to agree with each other?
Yes, it's a democratic group that we.
Well, I think, well, I mean, I don't know how you can handle it, but never mind. If you do have to do that, and so that means you'll have to agree on everything.
That's my question. If
I'm asking you, sweetheart. Now I've got to ask you this question first, Masha. What is the agreement between you? Before you do anything, you'll have to agree. You have to have a committee, and you'll put your hands up and say yes. And then, because you just said, should I slow down? Your slowing down implies that you can go ahead and do things without everybody's agreement. So what is exactly the structure you work with? It's really important to ask the question first.
It's not like with bosses or managers. It's just we are preparing a project that's happening in 1.5 years. So we have the same goal and we have the same democrat. Yeah.
Okay, you all do different components of this job?
Yes, we do
different. When you say slow down to allow him to go at his pace, do you need to do that because you won't get the project done otherwise, or you're just trying to be kind to him? Or I don't quite understand the point, Masha.
He gets super angry, like informs us closely to tantrums, for example, in the way how I write the letters for the group, or
okay, so stop again. You have to stop. Wait, Masha, do you all have to have an agreement about how you write the letters, or do you have the power to write the letters in the way you want? I've got to ask that question first. So please explain exactly.
It's something that we do all together. So mostly.
I don't believe you, Masha. I don't believe you, Masha. How many people in this ridiculous group?
7.
God almighty. So you mean before you write a letter, the 7 of you have to agree. Is that what? Is that right?
No, that's not right.
Well, then that's what I'm asking you. So who has the power to write the letter? Who writes the letter?
I write the letters to the village.
You've got to stop. You've got to stop now. So you have the right to write the letter on behalf of the group, and you don't need his approval. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And what about the other 6 people, 5 people? Do they have to approve of your writing the letter too?
It's the same like the other guy, only this guy gets angry all the time at the way how I do it.
Masha, we've got to establish certain ground rules first. I can't answer you otherwise. So you are agreeing you are a group on the one side. You're all working on the same project on the other. All of you have got your own tasks. So one of your tasks is to answer letters. Is that correct?
Yes.
And some other people do other tasks. So what is a task this angry guy does that doesn't need your approval?
He writes letters to other people outside
You all
of the
write
village.
letters. So you all write letters.
No, we're not only writing letters, but this is one of the things that he's doing, and he's preparing the meeting. So he's like the who puts
chairman.
I don't know what's a chairman, but I think something.
So, honey,
like that.
I mean, I don't know frankly how you can work in these crazy groups, these hippie groups, these bloody democratic groups. I think it's like going crazy, but you like it. It's your style, Masha. Good on you. Honey, if you have the power and the permission to write letters in the way you want without other people's permission, then he does not have a right to say anything. So let him get angry. Let him sit with his own anger. Who cares? So what's the problem with that? Because if you start trying to make this man happy, what would he want to do? What do you think you should do? What do you think you should do to stop him being angry? What do you think you can do? It's not possible. What do you think you can do to stop him being angry?
Yes, if I send the letters first to him and he corrects them,
okay,
then he's much more relaxed.
Then there'll be something else that you'll do that he won't be happy with, isn't there?
Sorry?
Then there'll be other things that you will do that won't make him happy, right?
Yes, right.
But it's wasting time, isn't it? So you've got to decide, why would you want to send in this letter? Just so he can get happy? Or, I mean, you've got to have the bigger project in mind, Masha. So then, can you live with him being angry? Does it upset you? Or you're nervous? Are you nervous about his anger?
Not anymore, but it
Okay,
took
then
me
well, then
some
get on with
time.
your job and let him live with his own anger. That's his problem. But if he has the right to see your letter, if it's necessary in the way you work with each other, then you must show him your letter. But as you've just told me, you don't need to show him your letter. Then
No.
get on with your damn job and let him sit with his own anger and let him be. Let him learn from his own anger. That's my suggestion to you. Are you able to do that?
Yeah.
Okay, then. Because if it's not this group, you know all the groups you work in, there's always going to be somebody, right, who doesn't like what you do. You can't make everybody happy, but you do your best.
Yeah.
Are you with my point?
Yes, yes, I was just, yeah. Okay.
Is that good enough advice?
Yeah.
Good then. Keep moving, baby, in this ridiculous democratic groups. I couldn't never stand to work that way. I'd rather just be the boss and get on with things. And people like what I do, they can come behind me. If they don't want it, they don't have to come. Try that style instead, Masha. Then I bet you'll achieve more.
Yes.
Experiment. Okay?
Yes, I understand.
Good girl. Good on you. Good on you. Keep moving, baby. What else, people? Anything else, people? Nothing? At 2 o'clock? Come on, you people. You just treat me like a machine. You press the button, I've just got to talk all the time. You have to ask me some questions. No, no questions. What can I do? Well, maybe we've done enough. I mean, I could talk for hours. You know that. Maybe there's enough food for thought today already. Let me see if I can read you some more from Rinpoche. This is Rinpoche's time. It's Rinpoche's book. Let me see what there is we can read. What to do. Okay. All right. All right. Maybe I'll read a little bit of this one here. While I'm thinking about what to read, you can think about what to ask. This chapter here.
I think your reading is very powerful, Venerable.
Oh, good. Okay. Oh, we did. I mean, let's continue with everything is merely labeled by the mind. We'll keep reading. Okay, we did that before. We'll finish that one because so two of these things, bodhicitta and wisdom together. The wisdom to know that you can change things in the way you see them, which is emptiness, and the compassion to want to be a benefit to others. You cannot have one without the other. The more you understand that each benefits the other, then it really makes sense, you know. Okay. All right, we'll continue with the A's and B's and C's. Each line of the design, each line of the design is not A. Even all the lines together are not A, because all the lines together are the base upon which your mind imputes A. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche is saying the person known as the Laudo Lama, not, is about to die, he said. The person known, the thought occurred, the person known as the Laudo Lama is about to die. This is a really incredible practice we should do. Instead of I am angry and I am jealous and I am depressed, or indeed he is angry, he is jealous, you can say, even the way they talk in ordinary language when you study the mind, the way they say it is anger says this, and there's jealousy, like all the roommates, there's anger, there's love, there's compassion. So even you, Masha, for example, this dude, this anger gets crazy. You think whatever his name is, Fred or whatever, you observe the behavior of Fred and you go, oh, that's interesting. There's anger in Fred's mind. There's attachment in Fred's mind. There's jealousy. And you know it because you can see it in yourself. And then it's not the whole guy is angry. The whole guy is bad. The whole guy is good. That's what we all tend to do. We over-exaggerate. We paint the whole of the person with that anger. And that's also a good way for you, Masha. You see he's angry. The anger is there in that mind. But you know there are other qualities there as well. And you won't see the whole guy as angry guy. That's a really powerful point. The same with ourselves, He didn't just say, I'm about to die. He said the person known as the Laudo Lama is about to die. That means the base, which is body and speech, they are the base for the label Lama Zopa. They're not Lama Zopa. This is not splitting hairs. This is a really powerful point, So if that base, those lines were already A, then the very first time you saw that design, before you were introduced to A, you would know that it is A. But the first time you saw it, you didn't see A. You just saw the lines. Only after you were introduced to it and your mind made up the label A, called it that, only then was there the appearance of A. Then you saw A. That very clearly proves the whole design is not A. It is the base to be labeled A. The question is whether it is labeled by the mind or not. Yes, it is labeled by mind. Without the mind labeling A doesn't exist. Without my mind over here, when my eyes see these shapes on the wall, without my mind knowing that it's Om Mani Padme Hum, believe me, for me, there is no Om Mani Padme Hum there. That's so logical. It's so clear, you know, it's so obvious. It doesn't mean there's a blank space on the wall. No, not like that. There are those shapes on the wall. A is labeled by mind. What is called A is a name, and the name has to come from the mind. The name has to be imputed by the mind. Right from the beginning, what caused your mind to label A? That's the question. Right from the beginning, what caused your mind to label A? You have to have seen some design first. Then your mind labeled A. All this happens, see, the trouble is always happens in a millisecond. It's too quick, we don't break it down, you know. The aggregates are not father. They are the base of the label father. He's using an example. Before you label father, you have to first see those particular aggregates, that particular shape of body, that face, and so on. You recognize those aggregates, then your mind labels father. You don't label father before seeing that particular body. The shape of the body that performs the function of father for you. You don't say, oh, father is coming into the house, unless you see that body. So first you see that particular body, that connection to you, then you label father. And only after that do you see father. It's very clear then that you don't see father before seeing the base, the body. You don't label father before seeing those particular bits of the body, those aggregates, which are the base of the label father. Nor do you label father at the same time that you see the base. This is really powerful because we think it's the same time, but there's an evolution of these in this process, you know. Nor do you label father at the same time that you see the base. Believing that it happens at the same time is totally wrong. This is already proven by experience. In order for your mind to label father is coming into the room, you have to first see the body coming into the room. This is the difference. This is the point. Father is not the body. This body is not Robina. Those aggregates are not Caroline. That couch, the material in the couch and the cushions is not the couch. This is the one we have to try to understand, not just some clever intellectual thought. It's got hugest meaning. You label the body beautiful, and then you believe in it. It's exactly the same with the body of the person you're attached to. You are seeing a body as beautiful, and then you believed in it. If your mind did not label it as beautiful and then believe that it is beautiful in the first place, there would be no appearance of beauty to you. You wouldn't see beauty. It is clear with this explanation. It all starts from your mind. So this is, see, the evolution of karma is interesting. Obviously, if you've got a person you're in love with, let's say your partner, you've obviously got a strong karmic connection with that person. That's clear. That's all part of the deal. And obviously you've been very kind to each other, because the way a person appears to you now has got very much to do with the most recent karmic connection you had with each other. Look at the Chinese communists. They've got a very strong karmic connection with the Dalai Lama. When they see the Dalai Lama, they get raging angry, don't they? So that's their mind now. It's true. But the karmic thing is the major part. So how come you have a strong, so if you've got, some people have a relationship for 40 years, live together, and they always see the good in each other. That's the extent of their past virtue to each other. Some people have a good relationship for 1 week and then start to hate each other. That then is the ripening of their negativity from the past. So you can't not factor in karma as well. Lama Zopa here is just talking the actual process of now, but the karmic one in relation to your partner is a huge aspect of it, a huge part of it. So then it is exactly the same with the body of the person you're attached to. You are seeing a body as beautiful. The evolution is exactly the same. Your mind labeled beautiful and then believed in it. If your mind did not label it as beautiful and then believe it that it is beautiful in the first place, there would be no appearance of beauty. You wouldn't see beauty. The base and the label are not separate, but they are different. This is a really interesting point. This is the more subtle understanding of emptiness, of dependent arising. So, same with the A. First, you see the design, then your mind labels A. Then you see A. Therefore, that design is not A. Rather, it is the base upon which we label A. This point is very important. The base is not the label. They are different phenomena. So how to look at this? This is right back to the basics. Whenever I talk about dependent arising and the two truths, right? Dependent arising and emptiness. Before we begin to understand how something exists, we have to first establish it by labeling it, and then we have to define it. Then we're on the same page, and now we can begin to discuss how it exists both conventionally and ultimately. So if you want to say what is the name, there's one phenomenon called Father. That's the name we give to the base. And in that case, the base is the body and mind that are the suitable base for the label my father. A suitable base, the body and the mind is the base of the name Robina's father. So that's roughly what father is. And now we look at something else called the base, which is the body and the mind. So what's the definition of a body? A body is the name we give to its base, which is the legs and the fingers and the ligaments and the pee-pee and the caca and the atoms. What's the mind? Mind is the label we give to its base, which is the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions. So you label each phenomenon, and then you decide what the label is and what is the base of that label. They're obviously separate every time. So if you say father is the name we give to the body and the mind, the combination, then how can you say father is just the body? It's clearly not. You're contradicting yourself. The body is a name we give to its base, which is the legs and the ligaments. Father is a name we give to its base, which is the combination of body and mind. So you've got to be precise and analytical like this. This is logic. This is logic. This is helping us understand dependent arising and helping us understand emptiness. This point is very important. The base is not the label. Father is not the body and the mind. Mind is not the parts. Body is not the ligaments and the legs. Glasses is not the frame and the lenses. Face is not the nose and the ear. Shoulder is not the bits of the bones. Every name you give has its own base, but it's not the same. It's a name you give to that base. And it must be a valid base. It must function as an elbow to be labeled elbow. It must function as Robina to be labeled Robina. It must function as a face to be labeled a face. It must function as an ear to be labeled an ear, a name on its valid base. The base is not the label. They are different phenomena. So the mother, father is one phenomenon. Body is another phenomenon. Mind is another phenomenon. There are three different phenomena there. So father can't be the same as the body, and it can't be the mind. They're different, but you can't separate them. You can't. So it's a more subtle way of things existing. It is extremely important. So the base and the label do not exist separately, but they exist differently. Maybe there's something in my computer or in Zoom or something that gives me asthma or gives my nose. As soon as I talk, half the teachings of me snotting my nose. I'm so sorry. I keep mentioning it too. Must be a bit boring. So
Venerable Robina, there's, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a question about what you're talking about right now. And the question is, can not labeling be practiced?
What? I don't understand the question.
Yes. Oh, well, Doris has the question, so maybe.
Whose question is
Doris.
Doris. What's the question, Doris?
I'm sorry, it was poorly worded. I mean, can you go around and purposely not label things as a way of practicing?
No, that's nihilism, Doris. It's foolish. You wouldn't.
No, I don't mean in a nihilistic way.
I am talking about that, but what you're just suggesting is nihilism. Not labeling things is completely insane. You have to label things to even communicate. You don't want to not label things. That's called nihilism, I repeat. So what would be the benefit of not labeling an apple an apple? What would be the benefit of not calling an apple an apple? What's the benefit, Doris?
Well, I wasn't looking at it as a nihilistic point of view, so I would
You
have
are.
to.
By asking that question is necessarily nihilistic, Doris.
Well,
Why
I'm
would
just
you
wondering
label
as a
apple,
method.
Doris, answer my question. Why would you not want to label an apple? What would be the benefit to you doing that, darling? Just tell me the benefit. I understand. What's the benefit of not labeling an apple an apple?
Thinking about being familiar with not labeling things.
I repeat again, why would you want to not label things? That's nihilism. I keep repeating it. So maybe you got to think about it for a bit, darling. Think about it.
So.
I guess
Thank
so.
you.
And then ask my question later. Anybody else there, Mary? No?
No, Venerable Robina, but I've been thinking about my aunt this whole teaching today. She's my mom's oldest sister, and she's my favorite also. And she's been in the hospital, and now she's in a care center. And she's always lived, she's 85, and she's always lived independently. And my mom went to her house, and she found her on the floor. And so right now they still don't know what's wrong, but she is incontinent and she cannot walk on her own, but they said it's not a stroke and they're trying to figure things out.
So what's the question, Mary?
But I guess I'm just thinking about how we have to practice now. I think that's what's just coming really in my in the foreground of my mind, this whole teaching, because when I call her every day, she asks me, why is this happening? I have no control.
How do you help her, darling? How do you help her? What do you tell her? How do you have a discussion with her? What are her viewpoints?
Well, I've been thinking about the Death and Dying book too, and this teaching. And so yesterday morning, she said she has no control. And I said, right, you're at everybody's mercy. And she's a very devout Catholic. And
okay,
so
good Mary. Now I know what her view is. So how are you helping her?
Well, I reminded her to pray to the Mother of Mercy, because I said, you're at everybody's mercy. You have to let go, because.
What did you say? The Mother who?
Mary, the Mother of Mercy.
You mean Our Lady?
You're Our Lady, right.
Well, that's all you can do. You just love her and be kind to her and tell her how God loves her and God is looking after her and Our Lady is looking after. You have to give her enormous courage by using the views that she's got. Now you tell me she's devoted, then it is easy to help her, Mary. It is easy. Why is it happening? She has faith in God. You tell her, God, don't you think God, don't tell it, shove it down her throat. Now we know what her view is. You have to help her. Well, do you think God's got a plan, Auntie, or whatever her name is? You have to talk to her, have a real serious conversation. She mightn't think about these things. You say she's devoted. Well, then use her views to help her, Mary. Don't just say, yeah, you're on the mercy of everybody else. No, she's not. She's in God's hands. God is loving her, looking after her, taking care of her. God's got a plan. Lift her up, give her courage to think positive things, Mary.
No, I feel like I have been doing that, and I called the
Okay, hang on. Please stop for a second. Stop for a second. So you are doing that.
Yes.
You are helping her then. You are helping her then get ready for death without saying the words. Would you agree with that?
I'm not sure if I don't know what her exact condition is, but I feel like I'm helping her.
Mary, are you helping your beloved auntie's mind lift her up a little bit, having faith in God, reminding of her own practice and giving her some courage and confidence? Well, then what's your question? You're helping her. What's the problem, darling? I don't think you have a problem. I'm not trying to be rude here. What's your problem, Mary? What's your problem, darling, besides your own sadness? And because you don't know what's happening. But I mean, you're helping her, using her views, her faith in God, her faith in Our Lady. You are helping her with that. Is that true?
Right.
Well, then what's your problem, Mary?
It's not, I think it was just to, I didn't really have a question, I guess. So
if you're helping your auntie in every way you possibly can to lift her mind up, are you trying to do that?
Yes.
To lift her view, to have a reminder of her faith in God, that God has got a plan. God loves her. Our Lady loves her. Rely upon them. Who cares about other people? Love them. You've got to push it into her. If she has faith, you're the one who said she has it. So you're using her own view to her advantage, Mary. There's nothing more you can do. Who cares? I mean, the doctors will do their job. But this is your job, lifting her mind, lifting her heart, giving her love, loving her, praising her. What a wonderful person you are. What a good life you've had. Just, you've got to be constantly optimistic. Have you got Lama Zopa's book? Have you read it somewhere there? Some of the practical things you can do. That's it, Mary. You don't have a question at all. You don't have a question. You're doing it exactly, but do it 10 times more optimistically and positively.
Right.
Within your own mind, realizing this is impermanence. She's not aware of it. She doesn't think about it, but now it's coming to the fact that she knows she's getting old and she's going to die. Don't say those words, but you can kind of talk to her, lift her. The main job is to have her mind happy, and you love her. Be kind and positive, optimistic, getting her to think about God, think about heaven, whatever. She doesn't know she's dying. Maybe she's not dying, but she's going to head towards it soon.
No, thank you. I think just hearing you say this again,
good,
because I know this, but when I talk to her, I
get caught up in all the facts and figures.
Right. And yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Lift her mind, lift her up.
And I think about this in your teachings. That's, I guess, mostly what I wanted to say is like integrating the information today and from your other classes. It's been so helpful, and because it's a different tradition, but I was raised a Catholic, and so
adjust it to that. You can adjust it to this view. That's right.
Right. And I did call her priest and asked him to deliver the Easter communion to her. So that's going to be a surprise tomorrow.
That's wonderful. That's so good. Get as much of that done as you can.
Okay.
Use all the tools that she has access to for her benefit as much as you can, and hold her emotionally and love her and praise her and be kind to her. That itself is a miracle.
Okay. Thank you.
Good, darling. Thank you, Mary. What else, people? Dearest ones, anything else? Well, I'll continue reading Rinpoche's book then. The label is not the base. The point is very important. This point is very important, So seeing the base and the label as indifferentiable, that is the object to be refuted. This is really subtle. This is like in the hard work of actually doing the analysis of dependent arising and getting to merely labeled, That is the wrong view. That is the false A. That is not the reality. Meditate on that. You can see very clearly that you can't find the A on this base, on those lines. Not one part of the lines is A, nor is one of the lines A. Even the whole group of lines is not A. You can't find A on those lines. If you look for it, you can't find it. This should be very clear. This is the reality. Nevertheless, there is a merely labeled A. So now, here is the point. You have to really pay attention here. This is the 45-page guide. Through this analysis, even though you cannot find A on the lines, it doesn't mean there is no A. There is A existing. Yes, there is A, because there is this design there on the blackboard, because there are these lines. There is A, but it is a merely labeled A. It's merely imputed by your mind. So just change this into the word I. It's exactly the analysis we have to do, you know. You cannot find the merely imputed A on the lines, but A can be found. It can be found on the blackboard because there is the base, the lines on the blackboard. But an A that is appearing to you on those lines as findable, which has the same meaning as a real I existing from its own side, that is completely false. That is the object to be refuted as described in the philosophical texts. When we realize that that A is totally non-existent, empty as it is empty, then we are realizing the ultimate nature of the A, that which is emptiness. And just change the word to I, and that's it. You know? The not merely labeled beautiful body does not exist. It is exactly the same with the beautiful body. The beautiful body appears there, as if it is there on the body, on the base, on the mind, on that person, after the mind has imputed it. It appears as findable, as a real one, as existing from its own side, not merely labeled by your mind. It even appears as if it never came from your mind, had nothing to do with your mind. Excuse me. The object appearing as not merely labeled by the mind is the subtle object to be refuted, according to the Prasangika Madhyamika view. One of the four schools, the Madhyamika, has two sub-schools, the Svatantrika and the Prasangika, and it is the Prasangika view of the object to be refuted that we're discussing here. So seeing the beautiful body as not merely labeled by mind is totally wrong, totally false. If you look, if you cannot find it there on the base, the aggregates, that beautiful body, not merely labeled by the mind. It is exactly the same as the analysis of A. So seeing the body as there, appearing kind of above the base, is totally false. In reality, if we analyze, we will realize that it is totally non-existent, empty right there. And that is the realization of the ultimate nature of the body. It is the same for the person, for everything. Now you can see there is no beautiful body existing there, existing that is not merely labeled by the mind. There is no real person not merely labeled by the mind. There is no such thing there. It is totally empty. That's why for Doris's question, it's completely nihilistic. If you don't label apple, then there's just nothing there, which is not how things exist. It's complete nihilism to not label. Nothing wrong with label, you must label, but it's got to be a valid label. What probably Doris is asking is not run around labeling angry and jealous and ugly and beautiful. Yeah, that's a good idea. That's different, but she didn't say that. Now you can see that body, beautiful body existing that is not merely labeled by the mind. There is no beautiful body. There's no anything that is not labeled by the mind. If it's not labeled by the mind, it doesn't exist. It's very simple. There's nothing there. It's nihilism. There's no such thing there. It is totally empty. But so there's got to be the labeling is perfect. So everything is labeled. That's what makes it exist, is merely labeled. That's what makes it exist. There's nothing more than that. Mind exaggerates beautiful this and beautiful that, and then attachment grasps onto it. But there is no such thing. Lama Tsongkhapa explained in the Lamrim Chenmo by quoting 400 stanzas by the great Indian Pandit Aryadeva. On the basis of what ignorance holding true existence exaggerates, the mind exaggerates. This is beautiful. Then attachment arises on that. This also applies to anger. On the basis of the person's body and so forth appearing as not merely imputed by mind, the mind exaggerates bad, ugly, then anger arises towards it. In reality, there's no such thing. There is no such object of anger in reality. It is a total hallucination, false. There is no such thing. On the basis of what ignorance holding to existence exaggerates, in other words, on the basis of ignorance exaggerating the existence of, in this case, the body as truly existent, the mind exaggerates this is ugly, undesirable. Then anger arises on that. You can clearly see the conclusion from this quotation. I may not have given it completely. I have given the essence, but maybe not all the words, Rinpoche says. So what ignorance grasping at truly existence exaggerates, what ignorance grasping as truly existent exaggerates is totally non-existent. The object of anger or attachment that you totally believe is there. Uh-oh, there's a typo. That is totally non-existent. Gosh, better fix that on the digital copies. Meditate on these points every day. Meditate every day on these points, the many different examples I have described, including the examples about attachment in chapter 9 and the analysis of what is reality and what is false that we've just discussed, especially the quotation from Aryadeva. Now you can see very clearly that the real I, that which appears and is believed as existing from its own side, that I is not in prison. You can't find it in the prison, and nor can you find it on the aggregates, the base. You must do this meditation every day. This is very important, no matter how many hours it takes. Delusions can be removed because they're impermanent. There is no question that ignorance and attachment can be removed from the mind because they are not permanent. They are causative phenomena and thus can be removed by the remedy path. Delusions can be removed because they're dependent arisings. In fact, all the defilements can be removed because they're dependent arisings. If they were independent, if they were not, then it would not be possible. But because they are dependent, they can be removed by other causes and conditions. Delusions can be removed because we possess Buddha nature. Finally, we can be liberated totally from all the delusions because we have Buddha nature. Every insect, every worm, every spider, every being in all the realms of existence all have mind, and all their minds have Buddha nature. The emptiness, what's happening? The emptiness of their mind, that emptiness of their mind is their Buddha nature. What means what that means is this. We all have Buddha nature. Let's describe this. We get very confused about this. It sounds like we've got some little Buddha inside trying to get out, you know. So what Buddha nature means is just how they talk. If you looked at I love the example of an acorn. If you looked at an acorn, if you didn't know what it was, if you're a squirrel, you think it's breakfast, don't you? Or if you think it's a weapon, you'd throw someone at somebody. If you think it's, a jewelry, you could make a nice necklace with a bunch of acorns. But when you discover what it is actually, we know it's a seed that if you give it the right conditions, it will end up turning into an oak tree. We know that. So some way to put that is that all acorns possess oak tree nature, don't they? We don't talk that way, but it's so perfect. It tells you exactly what it means. So all acorns, I mean, by definition, think about it. By definition, an acorn is a potential oak tree. It's not like a potential rose. It's not as if you have a choice. You could use it as breakfast. You could use it as a weapon. But what is it really? What is it in its bones? This is the way we're talking here. So Buddha's saying every mind, every consciousness, every mind possessor, every sentient being, by definition, is a potential Buddha. Is a potential Buddha. Therefore, every mind possesses Buddha nature. Every acorn possesses oak tree nature. So then the job is, don't just use it up and eat it for breakfast. What a waste. You turn it into what it really is, an oak tree. That's with us. But our trouble is, you look at an acorn and then your mummy points over there to an oak tree and she says, well, darling, if that's a potential oak tree, you'll laugh at her. There's nothing evident, is there? There's no evidence. There's nothing. It's just this funny little thing on the ground. And it's astonishing to you that that little baby thing can turn into that. Well, look at us now. It's like, for me, we think of ourselves as this human being or this person, and we basically identify with being an acorn, but we don't see any potential. We just see ourselves as an acorn, and we try to smooth out our acorn and become the best acorn and get some nice smoothing out and wear new little hats every day and try and become the best acorn. That's pathetic. You're missing the point of the acorn. That's what we think of as humans. It's nihilistic. I'm just a human, but have nice smooth skin and make myself pretty before I die and become a nice human. That's better than nothing. But look at your potential. It's unbelievable. When you hear that you've got the potential to transform your mind into the mind of a Buddha, where you can see reality and see things as they exist in all the minds of all beings and transform your mind and to manifest your mind in billions of forms throughout billions of universes for the sake of billions of eons to benefit billions of sentient beings. That's a big ask. That's your potential, baby. Not just to become a nice human and then drop dead. Not just be a nice acorn. So our views kind of limited. So to keep remembering you're a potential Buddha should bliss you out. So you better get the right conditions to manifest that natural potential, which is in you already. You don't inject oak tree nature into an acorn, do you? You give it the right conditions for it to flourish and become what it really is. Same with us. So that's why everyone can be free from suffering of samsara. Everyone can achieve Buddhahood, the total cessation of obscurations and the completion of all realizations. Remember, this is the meaning of the word Buddha. Even the subtle negative imprint that projects a subtle dual view can be removed completely by the wisdom realizing, directly perceiving emptiness with the support of bodhicitta, by completing all the merits of wisdom and the merits of virtue. Again, the two wings of the bird. Then your mind becomes a fully enlightened mind. True cessation can be achieved because there is a true path. Lord Buddha has revealed and explained the path in the scriptures, and there are many great masters in whose minds the path exists as experience, from whom we can learn it. There are many, fully developed oak trees already. We can learn from them and practice. This is how we can cease the defilements and be liberated forever from all suffering and its causes. Okay, people, I think that's enough. So unless you have questions, I'm going to finish.
Venerable Robina, there's a follow-up question from Majda, and I hope I can articulate it. She would like for me to read it. The question is, it's probably a habit in me to think I'm not important. And this is a follow-up question to her earlier discussion, but she thinks it's a habit and she's struggling with it. And how does that work?
If we have ego grasping, Masha, which is the root delusion, and let's assume we're all ordinary sentient beings, so we all have ego grasping, which is this primordial mistake that assumes I'm a separate, real, intrinsic me. If you've got that, then naturally you have attachment to get what that fantasy I wants. And then because of that attachment, one of its functions is dissatisfaction. So it way especially manifests for us in our culture, the feeling, the irony of this ego grasping causes us to feel we are nothing. And when we have a strong attachment, its main energy is dissatisfaction. So it's the disease we all have, and especially, as Lama Zopa says, in the West, we have this very strong sense of I'm not worthwhile. That's what we call low self-esteem. That's what we call self-hate. We might not express it like that. But there was this kind of unhappy assumption, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not big enough, I'm not. So therefore it can manifest as low self-esteem. It can. But equally, if you add all the other delusions to it, for example, we add pride. So pride would manifest. It's a very fragile state of mind, pride. You look at a person who's very arrogant. They look very big and loud and bossy, but they're very, very fragile. You just have to prick them. You just have to criticize them once and they deflate and they turn into low self-esteem. I'm a creep. So if you have specifically low self-esteem, it's the flip side of pride. If you have humility, then you have self-confidence. So we have to make this major distinction, as I'm always talking, between the deluded neurotic states of mind and the valid, reasonable ones. So we mix humility with low self-esteem. We mix self-confidence with arrogance. But all the delusions are like brittle and kind of nervous and neurotic and deluded and exaggerating and not comfortable. The virtues like self-confidence and humility are very comfortable. So, you know, if you think you're not worthwhile, you have to look at it more deeply. It's good to put others first. It's good to have compassion. So you've got to know the difference. You've got to know whether it's low self-esteem or a valid sense of other people being important. That doesn't mean, though, so we've got to see the difference, Masha, as we've often talked. I don't know if that helps at all. What else, darling?
Yeah. Oh.
Is that clear, Masha? Is that clear, darling?
Yeah, it's clear. I'm trying to get the line between, it's not that I'm all the time have a low self-esteem, but I have a kind of habit that I always, when some confrontation is there, I have kind of habit to take the confrontation on me for the other.
Sorry, Masha, explain what you mean by take it on me. So when this guy gets angry, what is your first response in your mind?
I don't know the word in English, but something that I will do to make it easier for him. We have a very, there is a word in Dutch and it is aanpassen, but I don't think it's in, it means that you, aanpassen is something that I do all the time.
What is it, good or bad? Is it friendly? Is it self-centered? Is it compassionate? What is it?
It is friendly, but I'm struggling if it is a friendly thing to do, but I'm struggling if it is compassion or not, because I think
I understand, Masha. I understand, darling. The trouble is, it is difficult to see the difference. If we have got, let's say, low self-esteem, it's hard to see the difference between that and humility. Humility is a good quality because it's relaxed, it's spacious, it's not ego-based, and it connects with others and it praises others. That's good. But we can't tell the difference until we're quite advanced, darling. We can't tell the difference between arrogance and self-confidence either. And we have to know the difference. So the key is, if it's uncomfortable, if your heart feels tight, then that's the deluded part. If it's spacious and empathetic, then it's positive. And you can't have one, the moment they're mixed with each other. So you can't have one perfect or one ugly. They're mixed together. That's what awareness helps us develop, the ability to distinguish between them. So keep practicing, Masha. But they're getting stronger, so clearly if he's angry, but if you're not, are you afraid of his anger?
Not anymore.
So when he gets angry, you just observe him being angry and you kind of you keep your ground steady, or you start?
Yes, I keep. I mean, it's not. I am not perfect in it, but I try to keep steady and go
that's
on.
Good. Good sign.
Yeah.
Good. Don't be afraid of his anger. People who are very afraid of anger are those who haven't dealt with their own anger. So if you've dealt with your mind a little bit, his anger won't. You'll just see a little child getting upset and having a tantrum. It won't upset you. So then you seem like you're doing okay. Keep moving. Okay. All right. Okay, darling. Thank you.
Thanks.
What else, folks? Sweetie pies, what else? Time to go, maybe. Enough. Good. Enough. So I recommend you get this book. As this is what Trish said, and it's really true. It's quite a revelation, this book. I love it very much. It's Rinpoche's teachings all locked away in these amazing advice to these prisoners, but it's advice to everybody. And we structured it in such a way that it really is a handbook. It's brilliant. I highly recommend. And the benefit is that the prison project gets the results, get the benefit. It's wonderful. Digital or hardback, either way. Paperback, very well. So that's enough, I think. You people all right? I'm running out of voice as usual. I don't know what's happening. I've got to go back to my singing coach. But my singing coach is my mother, and she's dead for 30 years. It's a bit late. I forgot how to breathe.
Venerable Robina, thank you so much. Shanka, the new SPC, is here, and he would like to offer the dedication and the Thanksgiving mandala.
Good, Shankar, darling. Thank you. Let's dedicate these lovely thoughts we end up with. So go, Shankar, you do. Thank you, Shankar. Let's Shankar, everybody. Meet Shankar. He now lives in Santa Fe, and he's our new program manager. Go, Shankar.
Well, I'm hoping that there's a delay in which when Mary tries to put there we go.
Okay. So this is offering the same as it did in the beginning. It's offering at the end as a thanksgiving for the teachings. Okay, we all sing together. Lovely.
Saji Boki Juxing Meto Tramri Rao Lingji Ni Degen Padi Sangye Jindu Mikte Uwa Ijoku Namada Jingla Chupaso. Then we can do this in English. And my Venerable Lama's life be firm, her wide divine action spread in the 10 directions. May the torch of the teachings of Losang always remain, dispelling the darkness of all beings in the 3 realms. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shankar. That's it. Oh, now we do these. Okay, so we're just thinking due to the, I'll say them in English, the real thoughts behind all this. So we think we're delighting this last 4 hours, as many thoughts as we've had, is as many seeds we've planted. So then we think all the virtuous karma we've created, all these virtuous karmic seeds we've dropped into our bank vaults by listening to these teachings, may they eventually ripen in our Buddhahood, so that we really are then qualified to lead all suffering sentient beings to enlightenment. That's what we're saying right there. Gewadi Nudo Dag Lama Sange Drugyone Drowa Chikyang Malu Pa Dei Sala Gurpa Shog. And then this other one, the precious one, the bodhicitta, may bodhicitta, the supreme jewel bodhicitta, this amazing thing Lama's ever talked about, which is our potential, this outrageous, amazing, vast, huge, insane, incredible, courageous attitude to never give up benefiting sentient beings, because there's no longer a load of rubbish in there. There's no longer a sense of a separate self. That's what's miraculous. So you only have this infinite love and compassion and only want to help every single sentient being. Can you imagine? May this grow and grow in the minds of all. That's it. That's it. That's it. Thank you, Shankar. And His Holiness Dalai Lama's long life. So Jigten, no, Lama Zopa did another little prayer. It's the wish granting, wish fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. To the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled.
And then Shanka, will you please read the long life prayer for Venerable?
Where's
Yes.
Lama? We must sing Lama Zopa Rinpoche's first. Please. Thank you. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers, honoring the 3 jewels, savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. And then our precious Lama Ursal, manifest reincarnation of Lama Yeshe, venerable one, to whose kindness exceeds that of all the conquerors, for whose wanderers in far-off places, for those wanderers in far-off places, especially the West, mindfully of loving concern for us, in intentionally descending again into a family of a far distant land, we make this request. Lama, please, please live long.
A rain of nectar extinguishing the conflagration of delusion. Mother of the victorious ones of the 3 times and 10 directions, Dharmakaya, the great bliss embraced by great compassion. My perfect Aryatara, who in an ordinary form are the guide for us pitiful transmigratory beings left guideless. How kind you are. May all your wishes be instantly fulfilled, and may your life be stable until samsara ends. Almighty One, you who destroy all the enemy of delusions, who reveal the Dharma of scripture and realization, spreading it in the mental continuum of transmigrating beings, thereby eliminating the 2 obscurations, including their imprints. How kind you are. May all your wishes be instantly fulfilled, and may your life be stable until samsara ends.
Okay, people, thank you, darlings, so much. So, yeah, thank you so much. I'm wonderful. So happy reading out from Lama Zopa Rinpoche's teachings. Wonderful. So never give up, sweetie pies. All of you people never give up. Trish, who's heard of suffering because of an accident. All of us don't wait for the accident to happen. Practice now. Don't wait till you're accused of murder. Don't wait till your husband leaves you. Don't wait till you get cancer. Don't wait till you get old. Start now. Start now. Start now. That's it. Then you'll be ready, babies. And life will be falling off a log easy for ourselves and others. Thank you, darlings. Goodbye. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Venerable.
Venerable Robina.
Thank you, Venerable Robina.
Thank you.